Started. Welcome everyone, and welcome everyone online to the 2023 Canadian Beef Cattle Check-Off Agency, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Chad Ross. I am co-chair of the AGM here this morning with Julie Mortensen. I'm past chair of the agency. I represent Saskatchewan on the agency, Saskatchewan Cattlemen's Association. I ranch with my wife at Estevan, Saskatchewan. About 2 years ago, we started the process of working on a youth strategy for the agency. Being a past 4-H leader, succession in our community, our industry, and on our boards was always very important to me. So 1 year ago, we brought on Julie Mortensen. She filled our youth position on our board, and it's an honor today to introduce Julie as a co-chair of today's AGM.
Thanks, Chad. So as Chad mentioned, I'm the youth member sitting on the Check-Off Agency. I'm the very first person to hold this position, and I just want to say thank you to the Check-Off Agency for believing in our youth and thinking that we deserve a seat at the table. I think it's really important that we all work together, and it's really inspiring to see this kind of collaboration take place. So my husband and I farm just north of Nakoma, Saskatchewan. We have a commercial cow-calf herd as well as a small purebred Hereford herd as well. I also work off-farm full-time at Richardson Pioneer, and I'm involved in a few other organizations such as the Saskatchewan Hereford Association and the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan. And it's an honor to be here today with you all. I'd like to start today just with introducing a few of our special guests, which we'd like to welcome now. So we've got Brian Douglas, Chair of the Farm Products Council of Canada with us. Brian, if you just want to give us a wave, I know you're in here, I did see you. Thank you, perfect. And then we also have Jean-Francois Leffier, also from the Farm Products Council, but a staff member. Jean, if you want to give us a wave as well, perfect, good morning. And then we also have Scott Dingwall, Chair of the Pork Promotion and Research Agency with us. Perfect, good morning, Scott. Then finally we have Howard Beckering from here in Alberta, actually. He will be our parliamentarian today. If we come across any procedural questions, Howard will be available to step in and help us out. He will also chair our election and resolution section for us today. Thank you, Howard, for your time this morning. And Howard, do you want to give a wave as well? Perfect, I see you there in the back, thank you. Finally, I would like to introduce our board members. If you'll also please stand and just give us a brief wave to when you hear your name, that would be perfect. So we've got our chair, Jeff Smith from Alberta. We have vice chair, Trevor Welch from New Brunswick. Finance chair, Kirk Jackson from Quebec. Governance chair, Larry Weatherby from Nova Scotia. Past chair, Chad Ross from Saskatchewan. Myself, the youth member, sitting ex officio. And then we'll go west to east, covering our producer reps as well. Andrea Van Eiderson from BC. Sheila Hilmer from Alberta. Mary Pazook from Manitoba. Jack Chafe from Ontario. David Francis from PEI. And then we have representing importers and exporters, as nominated by IE Canada, Coral Manastursky. And then we also have representing processors, packers, traders, and brokers as nominated by the Canadian Meat Council. We have Jeff Klein, Andre Forget, Russ Mallard, and John Curtis. We have representing retail and food service, Steve Christie. And we have Veal Farmers of Ontario, Jennifer Haley. Our members at large are Cam Daniels, Clay Holmes, Mike Guest, and Cameron Blake. And a special thank you to our awesome staff here at the agency. We've got Melinda Gurman, Taylor Fraser, Emily Taylor, and Brad McCallum.
Before we get to the business today, I would just like everyone to grab their AGM handbook. If you would turn to page 18 on the AGM handbook, please. This past year, we lost a friend, a fellow board member, a fellow cattleman. And it's with heavy hearts that we take a moment to recognize our BC agency member, Terry Weeb. He passed away shortly after our AGM last year. Terry joined the agency in 2019 and was keen to get to work right from the start. Terry will be remembered as a dedicated, salt-of-the-earth director who was always willing to lend a hand. His passion for the industry and doing what was right for Canadian producers will continue to be missed. Mike Guest and I had the opportunity to attend Terry's memorial, and it was evident in the neighbors and friends that he was just a salt-of-the-earth person. Please join me in a moment of silence to remember Terry. Rest in peace, cowboy. Okay, let's get to business here. We'll do some housekeeping items. Make sure your AGM handbook is available, as well as your voting cards and the annual report. If you'd like a hard copy and didn't grab one, raise your hand. Taylor can get it for you. Or you can scan your neighbor's book. There's a QR code there to get it online or on your mobile device. Some meeting logistics. The seats and tables up front are for voting delegates and boards, so if you fit one of those two categories, please move to those positions. And we are happy to invite observers and guests in the gallery at the back. Voting on a motion. Make sure when you're moving or seconding a motion, you clearly state your name and the association you represent. Julie or I will acknowledge you at that time. If you are voting on a motion, use your voting card when raising your hand. Green is for, red is against. It'll help for a quick scan of the room for a count, or for a count if we need to. I would like to officially declare that we have met quorum here today. The full set of AGM rules, you can view them on page 9 of your handbook if needed. Just a point of clarity. Only the agency board or voting delegates or meeting chairs or those invited to do so are invited to address the meeting or may address the meeting.
All right, so as far as our agenda today, you'll notice that it's on page 3 of your handbook. I'll give you all a few minutes to page to the right page, and then I will call for any additions to our agenda. I ask if you have any additions to our agenda today that you please raise your hand. All right, seeing no additions today, I will please welcome a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Okay, thanks, Russ. Russ Mallard moved the motion. Can I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Kirk. Oh. All right, Kirk Jackson seconded the motion. I'll call for some discussion from the floor. All right, hearing no discussion, I will now call the question. All those in favor, please raise your green card. Perfect. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move into the 2022 AGM minutes. I'm looking for approval of the 2022 AGM minutes. These minutes were distributed in advance for your review, and are available in the handbook as well on page 11. Looking at those, does anyone see any errors or omissions in the minutes from the 2022 AGM? I'll ask you to please raise your hand if so. All right, not seeing any. Can I please have a motion to approve the 2022 minutes as approved? All right, thanks, Trevor. Trevor Welch put forward the motion, and can I have a seconder? Thanks, Larry Weatherby. Call for some discussion on that if needed. Okay, no discussion. I'll now call the question. All those in favor, please raise your green card. Perfect, thank you. Any opposed? All right, not seeing any. I will now call that as carried. Thank you so much.
Moving to number 3 on our agenda, I'd like to, and I'm pleased to introduce the Chair of Farm Products Council of Canada, Brian Douglas. Brian, if you would come on up here and bring greetings on behalf of the Council. Brian is from beautiful Prince Edward Island, and we're happy to have him here today. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks, Chad. It's always a pleasure to be at your AGM here in Calgary. I'm a little tired. I didn't get into 3 o'clock last night. Air Canada's wonderful and they're on-time flights. So if I do have doze off here, give me a shove. But it's a pleasure to be here in Calgary, the center of Canada's beef industry. First of all, I guess I want to recognize the difficult situation many of you are experiencing in terms of drought, wildfires in Western Canada and Eastern Canada, wildfires, torrential rains. I guess it hits home. You see this in the news and go, wow. But my daughter and her partner were evacuated twice in Halifax. And you live just in the outskirts of Halifax. So this is real. And it really hits an impact. You get a call in the middle of the night saying we got to evacuate. It's something we got to deal with in the future and we have to be prepared for. But I guess you don't realize how serious it is when you get directly involved, which I have been in the past couple of months. In terms of the Beef Agency, Council commends the agency for another successful year. Under Jeff's leadership, the agency once again has brought added value to the producers and the entire Canadian beef sector. The continued focus on oversight of the regulatory framework of levy collection through the hiring of a new compliance officer, coupled with the inclusion of a youth representative on the board, which is great to see, are a testament to the agency's sense of purpose and willingness to prepare for the future. Council values the excellent relationship it has with the agency, both at the executive and staff level. This was evident last May when the agency graciously hosted us in Calgary for our first in-person meeting with our new council members. At that time, we had the opportunity to appreciate the interconnectedness of the beef value chain with visits to the Canadian Beef Centre of Excellence, a slaughter plant, a feedlot, and a ranch. In terms of our new members, I'm pleased to work alongside Bonnie DeHaan, a dairy producer and processor, as vice chair for the next 4 years, as well as Samantha Heverkamp, a hatching egg producer, as a member for the next 3 years term. You'll see Sam later on this week, and I have agreed to share this file with her. I didn't want to, but I thought it should be fair. Kind of like this file, but you'll see her a lot too. In terms of FPCC's activities, at our May meeting, we reviewed and approved the proposed amendment to the beef levies order to extend the date of the current levies orders to June 30th, 2024, which maintains the current levy. Now, a lot of you in this room probably don't know what FPCC or Farm Products Council of Canada is or does. So I brought along a little video to show you just what our roles and responsibilities are. The first part's got supply management on it, so just kind of glaze through that. And beef and pork are involved at the end, and you'll have some idea of what we're about. We're quite proud to represent a major portion of agriculture in terms of the feather industry, in terms of beef, in terms of pork, and the video does a much better job of explaining what we do than I could ever do up here. So Chad, you want to roll the video? Or someone just press a button? Okay.
The Farm Products Council of Canada. You may have never heard of our organization, but when you sit down to a meal, chances are that some is the result of a Canadian farmer and this council's regulatory work. This organization is the reason why Canada supply of poultry and eggs. Those are the farm products that we started with, and we are evolving to be much more. The Council is an important player in one of the healthiest and most stable farming sectors in the world. Indeed, the sun shines bright on Canadian poultry and egg farms. But that wasn't always the case.
There used to be a conflict within our borders, as there was unrest between the chicken and egg producers in different provinces, fighting over the same markets. During the 1960s and early 70s, there was an oversupply of two farm products: broiler chickens in Quebec and eggs in Ontario. This led producers to seek markets in each other's province. To gain market shares, they lowered their prices. The conflict spread across the country. Several provinces passed legislation restricting the entry of chicken and eggs into their markets. While low prices were great for consumers, it was a disaster for producers and supply chains. Chaos ensued.
In January of 1972, in response to the mayhem, the Farm Products Marketing Agencies Act was created. The Act established a national system of supply management for poultry and eggs based on 3 pillars: controlled production, fair producer pricing, import control. As part of the Act, the Farm Products Council of Canada was created to oversee this new system. The fighting and instability were replaced by cooperation and stability. The Farm Products Council of Canada was founded on April 1st, 1972. The founding of these 4 marketing agencies ensued: Egg Farmers of Canada, Turkey Farmers of Canada, Chicken Farmers of Canada, and Canadian Hatching Egg Producers. The Council provides oversight of them. The Council has evolved even further. It now supervises the activities of 2 national promotion and research agencies for the beef and pork sectors. Beef and pork are not supply managed sectors, but these are exciting new areas of business. And after 50 successful years, the supply management for poultry and eggs remains at the core of the Council's mandate. The Council is a public interest oversight body. It reports to Parliament through the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. The organization is guided by a council of members from across Canada, half of whom are primary producers. They are supported by a permanent staff based in Ottawa. The principal role is to maintain the balance between production and demand for regulated farm products. It officially approves the production level for each of the supply managed sectors and levies for all sectors it oversees. Furthermore, the Council ensures that there is a steady supply, carries out market analysis, and facilitates discussions between stakeholders to keep things moving. For all Canadians, the Farm Products Council of Canada provides many benefits. For poultry and egg products, it ensures that production is stable and sufficient to meet the demands of Canadians, that farmers' incomes are fair and stable, and that poultry and eggs continue to be produced locally as an important component of the food supply in Canada. With its evolution, the Council supports farmer-led promotion and research of beef and pork. It supports those agencies to deliver evidence-based information for consumers on production, nutrition, and food preparation. And it helps those industries to promote their products to solidify and expand markets. The end results are high-quality food products that are delicious and healthy from Canadian farms and food companies. We're proud of our history. We're proud of the sectors we serve.
Thank you for letting me show that video, and it shows what Farm Products is. A very diverse organization with in both areas in terms of non-supply and supply management, and I appreciate you giving me the time to explain what I'm in charge of, and I wish you a great AGM, and thanks for letting me speak this morning. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Brian. We really appreciate the close working relationship we've been able to foster with the FPCC. It's very important to us to have your seal of approval, and we're good partners going forwards. It's been so great to work with you, and it was a pleasure to meet you and your team on the council in October in Ottawa. Congratulations again on the 50th anniversary last year at the Farm Products Council. So now I'll take a minute to introduce Jeff Smith. Jeff has just completed his very first year of agency chair and will bring you his report. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Julie. Thanks again, everyone, for coming today to our annual general meeting here in Calgary. It's great to be able to see everyone, shake hands, and enjoy the week of learning and networking during the conference. I'd also like to say thank you and hello to anyone joining us virtually today. Like Chad has mentioned, first and foremost, those who haven't got the annual report, 2022-2023 annual report, there's copies in the back as well as the QR code here. Well, it's been a year since I was elected chair of the agency from our past chair, Chad Ross, and we're back into the full swing of things since the pandemic upended business as we knew it for a while. We're meeting in person a few times a year, visiting and networking with our provincial cattle associations, and exploring opportunities through our industry partners. We have focused a lot on growth and learning at the agency, and one of the opportunities we've built was the Youth Engagement Program. We welcomed Julie Mortensen to the board as our youth observer at our last AGM. And Julie has been an exceptional voice around the table. Young cattle producers in Canada should be proud of the representation that she has brought. I'd also like to thank Chad for mentoring Julie over this past year. We're going to be announcing our first ever scholarship winner today as well, which has been an exciting youth opportunity. With over 20 applicants from nearly all parts of the country, we're proud of the engagement we've had through this program. We continue to work with Farm Products Council of Canada and meet regularly with the chair, Mr. Douglas, and staff, Mr. Lafay, to work through regulatory framework. Our relationship has strengthened so much with the council over the past year, and we are so pleased to host the council this spring in Calgary for their meetings. We'd like to extend a thank you to Mr. Douglas and their council for giving us the opportunity to spend the day with them and to showcase our industry. We'd like to congratulate the council for their 50th anniversary this year as well. It's a significant milestone, and we're thankful to be part of the celebration with our other marketing promotion agencies across the country. The agency has come a long way with our administration programming in the past few years. We've recently added a new staff member, Brad McCollum, whose focus is solely on compliance and education. We've expanded these services we provide to other agencies as well, with the administration of the pork import levy, which utilizes the existing infrastructure of the beef import levy. We also have two proposed opportunities we will share with you later today in Melinda's presentation, which further showcases our commitment to delivering a strong value for the beef producers in Canada. I'd like to thank our service providers as their continued dedication and in delivering value to our industry. Andrea at BCRC, Amy at Public Stakeholders Engagement, and Michael at Canada Beef, as well as their entire staff and teams. They continue to focus on programs and strategies and turn check-off investments into measurable results worth much more. I'm looking forward to their presentation later this morning. It's been a pleasure to lead the agency over the past year, and I'm ready to work with this great group of agency members to continue delivering our mandate for the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, for your presentation. You'll also see Jeff's presentation in your AGM, or an annual report, excuse me. Is there any questions for Jeff at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to governance. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Larry Weatherby. Larry is our governance chair from Nova Scotia, and will bring you the committee report for governance.
Thanks, Chad. It's nice to see everybody here. We had a good turnout. I'd like to welcome everybody back here to Calgary. It has been a while since we've been here with our beef industry conference, but we're happy to be back at Stampede Park. A big thank you to the committee for their hard work on our priorities this year. Our committee's engaged a consultant to take a better look at how the marketing committee structure was working on our priorities this year. Our committee engaged a consultant to take a better look at how the marketing committee structure was working, since it has been in its current format for 5 years. The consultant completed a thorough review of the committee's ability to operate, which included interviews with the agency members and stakeholders. We also reviewed the agency's level of oversight. We were pleased that the end result of the thorough review indicated that there are no major challenges with the committee. Our stakeholders should feel confident that the agency continues to maintain a strong and level oversight over the committee, but also allows the marketing experts to do what they do best. The committee continues to work both with the executive and the agency members to encourage growth and education for our members. We supported opportunities this spring to ensure we have the right tools to govern our organization with the best interest of our stakeholders in mind. This year, we focused on a deeper dive into governance, director duties, and how to manage the different roles we all play in various associations. I am also pleased to report that our youth strategy has been a big success for our organization. We are now 1 full year through our first youth membership term, and it has been a pleasure to have Julia Mortensen sitting at the agency table with us. Julie is engaged and committed and is a great communicator between the agency and the youth producers that she represents. Julia was also a member of our governance committee this year and brought lots of great insight to the table in our committee work. Our committee reviewed agencies at the AGM itself and made the decision to continue hosting the meeting alongside of the CBIC conference. We reviewed the survey results from past years, and over 95% of those surveyed supported the meeting staying with CBIC. Sometimes it can be difficult to find a meeting time that doesn't overlap with other important things, so we will continue to work with the organization committee to try not to get the right spot and that we're not overlapping. I hope everyone here and watching online will take the survey following the meeting. It will give us more insight into how we can make this meeting better. You can find the link in a QR code to the survey in the meeting handbook. Again, I'd like to thank the Governance Committee for their work and thank you all here in Calgary and those online for joining us here today. My report.
Perfect. Thank you, Larry, for being with us today and giving us your report, as well as being a great chair to work with. You did teach me a lot about governance, so thank you for this past year. Now I'll call for questions. I see a hand up in the crowd. Yeah, if you'll approach the mic, please, in the center of the floor, and we'll hear your question.
Yeah, thanks, Fred Lozman, Alberta. Thanks, Larry, for that. I just, who was the consultant you hired for that committee governance review, and did they provide? Could they compare to any other organizations, the committee governance to other organizations? You mentioned a little bit about their process, but
Larry or Melinda, would you like to field that question?
Thanks, Fred. The consultant was Framework Analytics. Alec Milne did the work for us. And sorry, what was the second question about comparing?
well, just could they make a comparison to other organizations and their governance for the committee? I know it's a very unique situation.
Yeah, they didn't, and I'll report a little bit more on this in my presentation. They didn't do any comparison between any other governance and any other organizations. The overall gist to it was to review to make sure we were on track, because our marketing committee was the result of changes asked by the provinces back in 2018. And so we made those changes. We've tweaked it a little bit. What we did is we went out and we interviewed internal and external stakeholders to make sure that that marketing committee was hitting the mark in terms of what we were to deliver on. And what we found is we were on the right track, and the only comments they came back with was just some questions around or suggestions for internal onboarding so that new members understood their roles a little bit better.
Excellent. When's the agency as a whole due for a governance review?
So, and that's another great question. And so part of my presentation too, Fred, but this is great because this will help me speed up talking in a few minutes. So our current structure started off in about 2016. We tweaked again in 2018. We will be queuing up a full review of the agency in the next year, because we'll have had a full 5 years now as the agency under this structure with the new marketing committee as well.
Thanks, Melinda. Thanks, Larry.
Thanks for the question, Fred. I'll call for a last call for any other questions. Okay, seeing none, we'll call that to a close. So thank you, Larry and Melinda, for answering those. At this time, I'll welcome our agency's finance chair, Kirk Jackson, to present the agency's finance committee report. If you'd like to follow along with any part of the financial statements discussion, you can find that on page 42 of the annual report. All right, thank you, Kirk.
Thank you, Julie. So, good Monday morning to you all. Welcome to our AGM here in Calgary, and those joining us online. First of all, I'd like to thank my committee members, Russ Mullard, Mary Pazuak, and Trevor Welsh, for working hard on behalf of our industry to make sure that the check-off and import levy dollars were invested into programs and strategies that brought us a strong return on their investments. Last year, the agency brought in just over $18 million in check-off revenue and about $1.2 million in import levy. Our revenue was slightly down from last year, which was a product of fewer cattle marketings across the country, which was something anticipated, and we were able to work with our national service providers to budget accordingly. On our revenue provided, $18.6 million to service providers, and we invested just a little over $800,000 into administration and related programs like board administration, regulatory framework, compliance and inspection, and our youth programs, plus much more. Last year, the agency budgeted a 4.5% total revenue for administration and operations, which was a deficit budget to invest dollars from our supplies and reserves. At the end of the year, the agency only utilized 4.1% to operate and administer check-off and import levy. We are continuing to deliver value and deliver on our mission and visions to reduce administration, leaving more in the hands of research, market development, and promotion, and to invest in our industry. A lot of our committee and subcommittee work is focused on exploring the science, research, and experimental development, known as the SHRED program, which can offer a tax credit to producers who invest into research and development. We work closely with BCRC on this program to review to ensure that however we decide to proceed, we would have the support and cooperation of our industry's leading beef research organization. Our committee and the SHRED subcommittee have worked to develop a path forward which could deliver an investment return for producers. There will be more details be shared in Melinda's manager's report shortly. We have now worked with the audit firm MNP for 2 years, and we are pleased with the working relationship with them. MNP has developed a rotational approach to dig into different areas of the agency's finances each year. In this audit, special attention to marketing expenses and more associated with staff expense claims and payroll expenses for the entity. The audit came back clean, and we continue to work with MNP to look more closely at the agency's finance and operations for any cracks and inefficiencies. At this point, I'd like to introduce James Melnick from MNP to deliver our audit opinion. And after James, Melinda will take the podium to take us through the financial statements, and then the three of us will be able to be available to ask any financial questions. So at this moment, James, I'd like to welcome you to the podium.
Good morning. As Kirk had mentioned, we've been the auditors of the agencies for 2 years. We conducted our audit in accordance with Canadian auditing standards and ensured that we maintained our independence and objectivity as required by those professional standards. Our role as auditors is to ensure that the financial statements are free from material misstatements and errors, either due to intentional or accidental reporting items or due to fraud, and issue an audit opinion which flows from our work. Management retains the responsibility for the primary processing of transactions and recording transactions into the ledgers and ensuring that proper internal controls exist. The directors of the agency are responsible for overseeing the process, and we do meet prior to the audit to get their intake or input on how the year went and areas of concern where we might want to focus our work, as well as on the conclusion of the audit to report our results and our findings. During the audit, we examine the processes, controls, and supporting documentation that the agency has for specific transactions to ensure that these processes are effective, and we noted no significant deficiencies during our audit. We received excellent cooperation from the team at the agency, which allowed us to complete our audit on a timely and complete basis. And we were able to conclude that these financial statements are a fair representation for the operations of the agency and its financial position at March 31st, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So I want to again thank my committee this year and all the finance committees that have been here since I took finance chair in 2019. We have seen a lot of change in 10 years, and I have been on the agency, and I can honestly say that I'm very proud of the work that has all been done on behalf of all the Canadian beef producers in this industry. At this point, I'd like to welcome Melinda Gurman to walk us through the financial statements, and we'll take some questions about the statements and the financial areas. We can address all that after Melinda's presentation.
Good morning. Thanks, Kirk. Thanks, James. I also want to thank Canada Beef and Michael Young and Michael Chatou for their part in the audit, as well as we're all one big part of one big happy family and one legal entity. So I'm just going to get this thing moving. There we go. It's just a little slow. Hasn't had its coffee this morning. So if you want to refer to page 46 in your annual report, I'm going to have a look first at our statement of operations, or our income statement. So this statement is for the legal entity, and as I mentioned, this does include Canada Beef and the Canadian Beef Check-Off Agency. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly go through, review the numbers, have a look at where the money came from, where the money went, and just note any significant changes over the last year for you. So check-off revenue came in at 19.58 million. That's a different number than Kirk mentioned, because this number includes what's called the provincial portion of the federal levy. If we back that out, it's right around that 18.2 million. But if we look at that 19.58 million, we're down over last year about 700,000, which makes sense due to the decreased marketings that Kirk had referenced. This still, though, over the last 5 years, is our highest revenue for checkoff coming into the agency. If we break this down, and I'm going to flip you back and forth between a few different notes within your report. On page 58, this breaks this out by provincial association, collecting and sending in checkoff revenue. So that's note 14 on page 58. These numbers once again include that number called the provincial portion of the federal levy. And just to explain briefly what that is, when cattle are sold across borders, that's the national checkoff that's collected. So for example, when Saskatchewan cattle are sold in Alberta, Alberta collects the $4.50 on behalf of the agencies. They send us $2.50. The remainder of the money minus deductions goes back to Saskatchewan, to the province of origin. So all provinces receive this provincial portion of the federal levy. So just a brief explanation of what that is. So once again, revenue coming in at 19.58 million, broken out by the different provincial associations there. Back on page 46, import levy. This is currently collected at a rate of $1 per head on live animals, or a weight equivalent on beef and beef product coming into Canada. It's up over last year at 1.185 million, so that's up about 120,000. And as I mentioned, this is on live animals and on beef and beef product. And for live animals, it was for about 340,000 head of cattle coming into Canada this year. Fortunately, I don't have an east-west split. I know sometimes I do get asked that question. Unfortunately, I don't have that number today. But of that 340,000 live animals coming in this year, it is down over last year about 7,000 or 8,000 head of cattle. Other income is up significantly over previous year, about 200,000. Majority of this is a result of interest that we've collected on various accounts. We also have a new revenue stream. We've entered into an agreement with the Pork Promotion Research Agency to administer and deliver on their import levy. So we do have a revenue stream listed under other revenue there. And also our inspection services does bring in recovered dollars and recovered checkoff dollars, so we do have additional revenue on that side also. Canada Beef has some additional revenue in that line item for the Beef Centre of Excellence, and mostly for some service fees on some additional programming that they conduct also. Are you advancing or am I now? Oh, thank you. So this is doing nothing? No. Okay. After 8 years, she just reads my mind. It's amazing. Thank you, Taylor. Let's have a look at some additional revenue that comes into the marketing group. So once again, marketing is Canada Beef. Canada Beef does use the national checkoff dollars, and they leverage additional money with federal and provincial government programs. So this came in at 2.19 million federal government money, and also an initiative that they have with the Alberta government also. So all in, total revenue for the entire legal entity this past year was 23.2 million. Next, we'll have a look at where the money goes, and we'll have a look at the board expenses. Up significantly over previous year, 100,000 to 168,000. Makes sense as we've now started back to in-person meetings and doing more traveling. The marketing committee does operate as a standalone operational committee that provides oversight to Canada Beef. So we do record their expenses separately. They're up about 20,000 this year as well, at 28,000 for their oversight meetings with Canada Beef. Agency operations up slightly to 643,000. Once again, makes sense. The additional money really is the travel for staff, but really to run the operations, that's pretty consistent year over year. And as Kirk mentioned, our overall administration fee came in at about 4.1% for the past year. For other programs, this is where the majority of the money is sent out to our national service providers. So we've heard from Mr. Douglas, and the agency is an entity created under a regulatory framework. We're given a parameter in terms of what we can do, what we can spend the money on, with the privilege of collecting a checkoff and an import levy. So we have to make investments into marketing, promotion, and research for the benefit of Canadian producers all across Canada. And how that's decided is, it is decided by the provinces for the national checkoff dollars, and for the import levy, it's decided by the agency board of directors. On the next slide, you're going to see the breakdown by province for the 22-23 fiscal year. So as I said, the provinces control how your money's spent. When that comes in, you tell us every year, April 1st, how to allocate your money to marketing, promotion, to research. You can also pull money back for provincial investment. Provincial investment dollars still have to follow our regulatory framework in terms of investments into marketing, promotion, and research within a province with national benefit. Not a lot of changes over the last year, some minor tweaks with some of the provinces. We did see a significant change in the 22-23 year from New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. They did increase that amount they took back from 40 to 80%. Now, when that happens, we always make a telephone call to see if there's any issues or concerns with the agency or the service providers. That wasn't the case with Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. They cited decreased funding due to government cuts, and so that's why at that time in the 22-23 fiscal year, they did increase their take back. So let's have, this is where I'm really going to flip back and forth a bit between the last note, note 16 on page 63 and page 46. So the provincial stakeholder engagement, this one requires a little bit of flipping, but in total, this program received just under $1 million, $995,000 this past year, which has been spot on consistent for the last 3 years. It's received almost $1 million for the last 3 years, which is great news. This program is a joint program administered by the Canadian Cattle Association, but jointly delivered between CCA and Canada Beef. So we do split that money up when it comes in. We send 75% to CCA, and they receive just over $746,000, and 25% to Canada Beef. They received about $248,000. They do have to report jointly, though, under this mandate and initiative. Total spend on this program was just over $1 million, 1.082, and this was a result of carryover from the previous year from Canada Beef. You're allowed to carry money over and reinvest it into the next year programming, and so that's why that came in at just over $1 million. The marketing program, this is Canada Beef's programs. Once again, an internal committee to the agency. The generic marketing is the import levy. So they spent $1.37 million this year, up over last year. If you flip back to note 16, they actually received $1.28 million, so that is minus the agency administration for the dollars that came in under the import levy program. And they spent 1.37 because they topped it up with money that was rolled forward. For the import levy, that has to be kept in a separate bank account, separate line item, both on the agency and on the Canada Beef side, so we can clearly account for those dollars. Branded marketing, that's the national checkoff investments, both domestically and internationally. Canada Beef spent $11.8 million, up slightly over last year, and they received $9.6 million. So once again, they were using monies that were in surplus that they've dedicated to the branded marketing programs. Research is an easier number. This is just straight money transferred to the Beef Cattle Research Council, an external service provider. We sent them $4.7 million last year, down slightly over last year, really a result of the decreased marketings and some of those allocation changes we saw in the Maritimes. Provincial investment, once again, is that money allocated back to provinces that they have to invest under our eligibility criteria and report on to the agency. So any province, as I said, using those monies have to report how they plan to spend it and how they did spend it, and you'll see all of that in your annual report. You'll see a summary of those investments. But if you look at page 58, note 14, you'll see a breakdown of those distributions by provincial association. That came in at 2.18 million, very similar to the previous year. The next line item is that provincial portion of the federal levy, so the money that goes back to all provinces when their cattle are sold outside of their home province. That came in at 1.28 million, down slightly over last year, once again a result of the decreased marketings over the previous year. Lastly, you'll see the entity is in a deficit at 51,000. This is from Canada Beef. Canada Beef was running a deficit budget last year to start to use up and continue to use up surplus as a result of COVID. And on page 45, I just want to close by having a quick look at our balance sheet. This shows the health of the legal entity as of March 31st, 2023. See cash on hand at 8.4 million, down over last year. The agency and the entity continues to hold internally restricted cash at $3 million. That is in the event if we have to wind down the agency and or Canada Beef. And the agency also holds an additional $364,000 for emergency situations. Accounts receivable, money owed to the entity at about $4 million. Most of this is check-off dollars that was still to come in at that point in time. Accounts payable, money owed out on March 31st, about $2.6 million, once again, mostly check-off dollars to be allocated. And lastly, you'll see net assets at $14.23 million, showing the entity in a positive position. Kirk, that ends a quick review of our financial statements and would be happy to entertain any questions.
I almost spoke too soon. I was going to say silence is good. And the one thing that I didn't mention before is that all questions that will be asked will be answered in French.
Fair enough. Yeah, Fred Lozman, Alberta. Thanks for excellent report. So, excellent, 4.1% of funds are administration, which I think is like, I think the agency's lean and mean. Is there a formal threshold or a formal commitment not to go over? Is there an expectation from Farm Products Council of Canada for any of its agencies to cap their administration costs?
En français? I can't do that. No, and I don't know if Mr. Douglas or Jean-Francois would like to speak to this as well. There's no formal commitment the agency has to stay at X dollars in terms of our administration. What we do is we develop a business plan every year, and we're very clear about what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and what it's going to cost. That plan is reviewed and approved by the agency board of directors as well as Farm Products Canada. And for the last, so this is my 8th annual general meeting, for the last 2 years we've held our administration, including, this current fiscal year, at 4.5%. So we're always underspent where we're budgeting. We were prior to that 5%, and we are sitting on surplus too. That is why we've dropped our administrative percentage as well. We're trying to use up some of our surplus dollars, but Farm Products doesn't necessarily say agency board, your administration has to be X, but they do review and approve that plan. And I see Mr. Douglas standing up, and perhaps he'd like to make some additional comments. Yes, do you want to come to the mic, please? Thank you.
Great question. And we do review it on a yearly basis, and if we thought there was a problem, we'd notify them right away. 4.1 in an organization is pretty good, and they're probably one of the better administrative costs of all the agencies we monitor. So, but we do watch it on a yearly basis. So, it's part of our role as oversight bodies to keep that under control. But they've done an excellent job, and they said they lowered it from 5 to 4.1. So we are on top of this file. Thank you.
And just in addition to that too, when we have some of our expenses in our bylaws, and whenever we make changes to level of expenses, that does have to get approved by Farm Products.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
So if there's no more questions, this concludes the financial report, and right now I'd like to pass the podium back to Melinda. She can dive right into her general manager's report. So thank you.
It's going to be harder for Taylor to read my mind on this one. Maybe, maybe not. And we've had great questions already, and so I think a lot of what I was going to talk about, I can maybe go a little bit quicker, which I'm sure everyone is happy about that. So I just want to provide a quick review, talk about some of the highlights, give you some updates, and also just mention a couple initiatives and proposals that the agency board of directors have been working on this year. So as I mentioned, this year marks my 8th annual general meeting, and as I was preparing for this one, I had some flashbacks and maybe a little PTSD to 2016. I don't know if any of you were here for the 2016 meeting. It was a very active meeting, and not a bad thing. There was a lot of change that the provinces wanted us to make, and a lot of direction given, and I think over the last 8 years, we've delivered on that, and that's something I'm really proud of, and I think we're in a really good place. And part of that was the transparency that comes back to our budget and being clear about our administration and our percentage and how we spend the money. And part of that was the separation between Canada Beef and the Check-Off Agency. The way it was before 2016 is the money was collected and then spent by a service provider. Now we have that clear delineation between those that collect and administer the money and those that spend the money, and I think that goes a long way in terms of delivering on our transparency that we made a commitment to. In those 8 years, I also worked with 5 different chairs, and Chad, I think you were my first one to go all the way, so thank you. I really appreciate that. And Jeff, we're on the right track. But those 5 chairs, they played a big part in getting us to where we are today. And you know, the agency's mandate, as you know, we operate under a regulatory framework, and high level, our goal is to have the privilege to collect a checkoff and an import levy and invest those dollars into marketing, promotion, and research for the benefit of all Canadian beef producers. And I think when you hear our reports from our service providers, you're going to see that we're doing exactly that. The agency's mission and goal is to ensure prudent and transparent administration of those dollars, which I think we're delivering on, and to also ensure that now and into the future, we have a unified and a sustainable checkoff mechanism. Because when you look at being able to collect almost $20 million a year and invest that into the industry, I think that's something worthwhile and valuable for us to continue to ensure that it's around for many more years to come. I mentioned the inspection program, or maybe I didn't, I can't remember, someone did. We do have an inspection program over the last few years, and Brad McCollum has joined us now as our full-time compliance and education manager. And Brad's worked with us part-time as well for a few years, and we made the decision this June to bring him on full-time. We've seen tremendous growth in this program, and when we talk about promoting marketing and being able to conduct research, we need the money to do that. We need to ensure we have a reliable, sustainable checkoff mechanism. A compliance and education program helps us get there. And that program isn't about going out with a stick. It's going out and educating and talking to people and helping them make changes. And this helps us ensure we have that transparent and sustainable mechanism that we're talking about. So Brad's going to continue to work on a whole bunch of different focus areas. One of them is going out in the field and actually doing inspections of dealers and auction marts, working with them to improve their systems and identify any checkoff that may have been missed and make those changes and corrections. We're also now starting to provide, because we have the expertise in-house, a checkoff program for provinces to also go in and help for provincial checkoff. Legally, we only have the authority right now under Farm Products and the federal ag minister to do federal national checkoff inspections, but when appointed and given the authority by provinces, we can also conduct provincial inspections as well. And that program has really taken off, and we've seen tremendous benefit back to some of our provincial associations. Brad, also this year with Emily, our finance person and our office manager, is starting to do national service provider audits. This is helping us ensure we're maintaining our transparency and that we're meeting our regulatory obligations. So we just finished, and thank you once again to Canada Beef for being our guinea pig. We're about to finish our very first national service provider audit. So Brad and Emily have gone in, they've taken business plans, they've looked at them and said, you've committed to do these programs for this much money, and we're following the money now. And that is a requirement under our regulatory obligation. And I'm pleased to give the thumbs up to Canada Beef, job well done. The report isn't in yet, but I think it's looking pretty good. So once again, all of this is helping us meet our regulatory obligations and making it fair and transparent for everyone. And Brad just completed some other inspections as well this last week or the week before. And you see that number 350,000 up there. We're now over top of a $500,000 mark actually in the last 12 to 18 months. So when people, and even when I was a provincial manager, we never really knew how much slippage was out there. And I want to just commend Brad for all his hard work. We've been really proud of how successful this program's been. Quality data. This is kind of something that happened just because of what we do. So we collect all of this marketing information and data, and we've kind of become known as the holder of some really good quality data. And that's because we're just reporting on what comes into us, and they're actual marketings all across Canada. So a lot of people have become really interested in using our numbers, and just to be sure everyone feels comfortable, our data is completely sanitized. It can never be traced back to anyone. It's strictly marketings within a province and marketings outside of provinces. So we've started to put this information together that we've always had, provide it back to the provinces in the form of a report card in the fall, so that provinces can use this as part of their budgeting information, because they know how many marketings happened within their province, how many marketings happened outside of their province, and where their cattle went when they left their province. It's also helped actually in our inspection program, and it's helped us identify slippage. We've had provincial managers call us and say, I don't see any cattle sold in X province, and I know cattle are sold there. We've had an opportunity then to go back and investigate and find that things were being reported incorrectly and make that change so that the money was going back to the right province. This information also now is used by the Canadian Canadian Cattle Association to help with their provincial assessments for provinces paying CCA to do all of their great work as well. So our numbers are used as part of that calculation. And more recently, we've just entered into a service agreement with Statistics Canada to provide our information to them as one of their data sets for their Canadian herd inventory numbers. And those numbers are important. I used to use them a lot when I used to do budgets. For accuracy reasons, I've looked at other data sources lately, but now they're interested in using our information because of the accuracy of them. And overall, what we're hoping we're going to see here is increase in the accuracy of the numbers in terms of inventory reporting from Statistics Canada. But also it will feed into their Ag Zero initiative, meaning they're looking at decreasing survey burden to producers to get those herd inventory numbers. And I think every producer in this room would welcome less phone calls and less paperwork in terms of all the surveys they do, particularly on the inventory numbers. So hoping that that's really going to come together over the next little while as well. We've mentioned this a lot already, how happy we are to have Julie, and she's absolutely amazing. And I can't believe it's only been a year. It feels like she's been with us for 10 years because of how much value she's added back to our organization already. Our first youth member ever. I also want to really thank Jessica from the CCA Youth Council for partnering with us on this program. That's how we found this very qualified young lady to come and work with us for a couple years. We pair her with a mentor, and Chad Ross, can't think of a better mentor. Well, by default, because you're from Saskatchewan, but you're really good too. So we're pleased to pair Julie with Chad, and it's just been great. And that mentoring helps Julie get up to speed in terms of the agency and the checkoff, and that it's not always straightforward, so it helps with that. But also it's a goal of both Jeff and Chad to give back to the youth, particularly around financial literacy and helping and supporting them there. So we're looking at other programs too to continue to build Julie's skill set in that area also. Our scholarship program, we're going to hear the winner today. Super exciting. The committee had a really hard time picking a scholarship winner for our first ever scholarship this year. The quality was amazing, and I'm glad I was not a part of that committee because I know it was a real hard time coming up with the winner. But all of this, once again, I think is important because it lends to our long-term sustainability, understanding the check-off mechanism, and understanding the value of the check-off mechanism. The next slide I'm not going to spend any time on. I've already mentioned this through Fred's question about our marketing committee review. Very important. All organizations need to review these types of things, particularly if you've gone through change recently. Our committee went through change 5 years ago, and it was important for us to do that review, and as I said, it was a positive review. The next slide, I just want to mention another service that we've been doing, and this also kind of helps us keep down our administration costs, is because we're very specialized in what we do. We have started providing services outside of the beef industry, and Mr. Douglas mentioned the promotion research agencies. The Canadian beef industry, or our industry, the beef industry, was the very first promotion research agency ever. And for over 20 years, we were the only one, and it was pretty lonely. We were recently joined by our friends and colleagues in the pork sector as they formed a pork promotion research agency. We've entered into a service agreement with them to assist in the collection of their import levy because we have a developed mechanism already. And for them, it helps, I hope, in terms of efficiencies and bring them up to a higher collection rate faster. For us, too, it was also incredibly beneficial because when we started to examine our processes externally, it actually helped us identify areas where we could continue to improve. So it's been a tremendous partnership. And I'm really, really happy. And I'm going to invite Scott Dingwall, the chair of the Pork Promotion Research Agency, to come up and say a few words, and he's making his way to the podium. One of the other things I do, and I spend a lot of time every year, is I get calls from other commodity groups who ask questions about how to establish a promotion research agency, and I am very happy always to give them that any time I can. I believe very strongly in the promotion research agency model. I think it gives so much back to the producers in terms of value around investments into marketing, promotion, and research. So Scott, if you'd please.
Thank you, Chad and Melinda and Julie. I do realize it's unusual to have a non-staff member or non-director address your group, and I'm very much privileged and honored to have the ability to do that. I'm a hog producer from Prince Edward Island. I produce hogs and PEI in New Brunswick. I've been on the Canada Pork Council in the past for many years, and I was there more than several years ago when the idea of a PRA was announced at the Canada Pork Council board. You know, we can collect money on imports equivalent to what our producers are paying in Canada. Yes, let's do that. Well, it took 10 years and a COVID outbreak to get it done. We actually went through the first 2 years of our organization on Zoom meetings and that wonderful time, but we did establish it. Key to the establishment of the Pork Promotion and Research Agency is the partnership that we share together. The ability to have drawn on beef industry's past experiences, their lessons learned, seeing today for myself the quality and the engagement of your industry, it just furthers my belief that it was an excellent choice for the pork industry to partner with the beef industry on collections. And it's more than just a service provider agreement, because I know that our staff, our administration is provided through the Canada Pork Council, have a very tight working relationship with Melinda and your staff. And we've got the ability to say, hey, we've hit this problem. Have you seen it before? And More often than not, the answer has been yes, we have seen that, and it's allowed us to jump ahead. In our initial business plan, we had hoped, set targets for a certain dollar amount and a certain percentage of collections, and honestly, we've blown those numbers out of the water because of our relationship with you. You know, our last 2 current months have been over 90% collection rates. Our initial business plan said, hey, if we can get to 50%, we'll be doing something. So I won't take any more of your agenda, but I do very much appreciate the time to come forward and say thank you for that partnership. As I told Chad this morning, the only thing that makes beef better is when you wrap it in bacon. So, thank you again, and I do appreciate the time on your agenda.
Thanks, Scott, and I agree about bacon-wrapped beef. Okay, I have 2 more really quick initiatives just to chat with you a bit about, and these are new initiatives that the agency's been working on. Where there are still proposals, there's still some questions to answer, but pretty exciting initiatives nonetheless. The first one is one that we've actually been working on now for over a year in partnership with the Beef Cattle Research Council. And this is something we've heard about for many years, but we just haven't had the time or resources to dig into it. And over the last year, as I mentioned, we've been examining the feasibility of implementing a scientific research and experimental development tax credit program for beef producers who pay the check-off. And so, because that's a long name, we just call it SHRED. And what SHRED is a federal government tax program, incentive program, used to encourage investments into research and development in Canada. Now, we know that we collect over around $20 million, and that some of that goes to BCRC every year. And so we know that there are eligible tax credits out there because check-off dollars are being allocated to research. We formed a working group because this is complex, and if you start to ask me how to calculate how much tax credit you might get, I'm going to call on Andrea. Everyone always thinks Reynolds the smartest person at BCRC. It's actually Andrea. But yeah, she already shook her head no. It's hard to calculate this stuff, hence why we did contract KPMG to work with us on this. We also formed a working group to help guide us on this. And first and foremost, what the agency board said, what you have to look at is it feasible to do this? And does it make sense in terms of the cost to do this and the amount of administrative burden, both to the agency staff and to the Beef Cattle Research Council? That has always been our go or no-go lens that we've used over the last years we've investigated this program. So we formed a working group to help keep us on the right track. Sheila Hilmar is the chair from Alberta Beef Producers. Kirk Jackson, our finance chair, also sits on this committee. Because this is an important partnership with BCRC, Andrea sits on it. And because we wanted to broaden out our skill set and our knowledge and keep other people engaged as well, we asked Michael Young to join us on this committee also, and then I was on it as well. So what did we find? So far we found that yes, there is qualifying dollars that go into BCRC that would qualify for SHRED tax incentive at about $4.3 million annually. Producers, when they file their taxes every year, would be able to apply or would be eligible for a tax incentive based on the amount of national checkoff dollars that they paid in and how much of that was allocated to research. And as I mentioned, our big goal right now was to make sure this would not cost significant dollars to develop and maintain or significant burden. And we believe, and Andrea and I met recently on this as well, that the cost would be lower and that the impact administratively would not be significant. It wouldn't require additional staff to be hired just to administer this program. And that was something very important for us to understand. So in terms of next step, our first goal has been reached. We know that there's qualifying dollars out there. We know there's a mechanism to develop and implement this. Now it's putting all the pieces together. And the next step for us is to continue to work with our consultants and apply to the Canadian Revenue Agency to have the Beef Cattle Research Council listed as an eligible entity. Once that happens, and if that happens, and at this point we don't think there would be any hiccups there, we would be able to continue to fully develop this program with a goal of implementation for the 2024 tax season. So still more to come on this, still more questions to ask and answers to get, but so far we've checked the big box about the cost and the administrative burden and whether or not there would be qualifying dollars going back to producers. So I'll stop on that one, and I'll just go into my last proposal announcement, and then I'll open it up for questions, because I'm sure there's questions Andrea is going to have to answer about that shred. The last one I want to mention is provincial administration increase. So over the last few months, the executive has been working with staff on looking at a new proposal, a new model for how we compensate the provinces for collecting the national check-off. And we worked on it for a long time. We presented it to the agency board of directors at the end of June, and then we presented it to all of our national service, or to the provincial cattle associations in July for feedback. And we had about a 3 to 4 week comment period. And so far, we have had no negative comments coming back from our stakeholders. We also engaged our national service providers on this as well. Once again, we had support to move forward with this. Currently, how we compensate provinces to collect the national checkoff is we pay 2 cents per head on interprovincial marketings from the provincial portion of the federal levy. Lots of words. So we pay 2 cents per head when cattle are sold outside of the province. So when cattle from Saskatchewan are sold in Alberta, Alberta would collect that money and send it to us. We send the remainder to Saskatchewan after we take our $2.50. Alberta gets to keep 2 cents per head on those marketings, and only those marketings. We've never had a change. This is how we've done it for over 20 years. And it was at the $1, which equates to 2%. So our new proposal is we're looking at moving from 2 cents per head on interprovincial to 2% on all marketings out of the national checkoff portion now. So this also means that the $2.50 used to come into us whole without any deductions. Now it would mean we would get $2.45. We would be paying additional money to the provinces to help us collect the national checkoff. So what does this mean? Yes, an increase to all of the provincial cattle associations for helping us collect the national checkoff, and yes, a decrease to all of the national service providers, as well as the agency, and also a decrease to provinces that are taking money back for provincial investment as well, at a 2% level. So, why now? We've had as I said, our provincial administration has always been 2 cents on the $1 or 2% on the $1. The $1 was never fractured because the provinces agreed 20 years ago they wanted one whole dollar coming in, not to fracture that. We increased checkoff in 2017-18 and went from 6 or 7 million to now you see 18 million minus the provincial portion. So there's an opportunity for us to address that. We also know that everything costs more. Operating costs, administrative costs cost more, and we've heard from more and more provinces that they're under financial pressure. I mentioned allocation changes with New Brunswick and Nova Scotia last year. We've heard from other provinces this year that they're under more and more pressure financially. First time ever we have one of our provinces taking back dollars starting April 1st that never did before. And once again, when those allocation changes happen, we call them up and see what's up. And it was financial pressure that they're facing. So the executive and the board thought now was the time to consider a change of how we compensate those that help us collect the national checkoff. This is part of that long-term sustainability of our checkoff collection mechanism. So pros and cons. Yes, with this change, we're hoping that this is going to help with some of the pressure that provinces are facing financially. With this administration as well, it comes with fewer restrictions. So it means it can be used on operations, and there's no reporting associated with it. Now, when a province takes money back under the allocation mechanism, it can only be used for certain things, and it has to be reported on. So these dollars come with no restrictions and no reporting. We're also hoping that moving just from a 2 cent to a percent, which really it always was 2%, that it just makes it scalable for any future changes in checkoff. Not saying there is a change, just any future changes in checkoff. This does mean an impact to all national service providers, the agency as well, in terms of a decrease, a 2% decrease overall. But with this, talking about it now in August gives time for everyone to plan for this in their budgets for April 1st if we continue to move forward on it. So next steps, as I said, we've consulted with all of the provincial associations, we've talked with our national service providers, we're presenting today, we look for more feedback. And if we continue, we're hoping to develop this and roll it out to start April 1st of 2024. So Mr. Chair, Mr. and Mrs. Chair, that sounds wrong. Julie and Chad, that closes my report. As I close, I'd just like to thank the agency board of directors over this past year for all of their support and guidance. I work with a great group of people all across Canada in all disciplines of our industry. And also, of course, I need to thank the staff. It's easy for me to get up here and just prattle on because I have fantastic staff that help me each and every day. Taylor Fraser, who's been with me for 8 years, Emily, who's now in her 2nd year full-time with us, and just a great addition to our team, and Brad, who's in his 2nd month with us and still seems happy, so that's good. And we're very complementary in how we work together, and we have very complementary skill sets, so we can do a lot with 4 of us, and I'm just really, really appreciative of all their hard work and support, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Melinda. Are there any questions for Melinda before we move on? Yeah, come on up. Please state your name and where you're from.
John Doherty with Alberta Beef Producers. I just had a question about the check-offs. I was wondering why Ontario remains at $1 per head and all the other provinces are at $2.50.
Yeah, great question. So when we increased the national checkoff in 17-18, this was in response to the national beef strategy. So there was a working group in 14-15-ish that developed a national beef strategy with the intent to continue to move the industry forward. Checkoff was part of the revenue to fully fund that strategy. When that strategy was developed, it was determined that checkoff needed to increase to be able to fully fund. And all of the provinces were present and around the table for that strategy and for that discussion around national checkoff increase. When we move forward to do the increase, it is dependent on each province then at their board level, at their producer level, making that decision to move forward. To date, Ontario hasn't made that decision at the board and producer level to move forward. We've been continuing to work with them. I think we have a great relationship. Things are moving in a positive direction, but they are still at $1 per head.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Recognize Chad.
Yeah, it's Jack Chafe from Ontario. I'd just like to address the last question. So maybe the story that never gets told when that question gets asked is, like on the provincial side, on the marketing, we actually put in an additional $1.3 million into our provincial marketing. And then on research, there's an additional $250,000. And then, and this is more because of the demographics within our population in Ontario. On the public and stakeholder engagement, we have our federal, which we put in the suggested amount, and then on top of that, we put another $570,000 in. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows, even though we're not paying the $250, we do put a lot of additional dollars in from the provincial side.
Okay, thank you for the question and the response to the question. Are there any other questions for Melinda? Okay, well, seeing none, I'd just like to make a comment and just say, have confidence, folks. You know, Melinda and her crew, Taylor, Emily, and Brad, they're true professionals. And I had the pleasure of working with Melinda and her team for 3 years as chair, and it was great. And I just want you to have confidence that they're representing you, the producers, and the money that we put in to the agency in the best ability they can. So thank you for all you do. Appreciate it. With that, we'll go ahead and move to break. Let's take 20 minutes, so we'll reconvene here at quarter till the hour.
All right, if I can have your attention, please. Okay, thank you everyone. Welcome back. We hope you were able to grab a coffee and a snack and are ready to kick off the second half of our meeting here this morning. In 2023, we were proud to select the very first recipient of the Canadian Beef Check-Off Agency Scholarship. We had over 20 video submissions, and our selections committee, which I was lucky enough to be on, had a very difficult job set before us to choose just one winner. The top 5 videos scored incredibly close, and we were thrilled at the quality of the submissions we received. The $2,000 scholarship was awarded to an individual who shared their story about the future of the beef industry and how they plan to shape our industry through their education and future career. To announce the winner of the scholarship for the very first time, we'd like to introduce our winner by sharing their video application. You'll be able to watch it now.
Hello, my name is Hannah Nickel. I grew up on a beef and sheep farm outside of Barhead, Alberta. This is my third summer working on my family farm as an official employee. I am going into my second year of environmental and conservation sciences at the University of Alberta.
My parents have always incorporated regenerative farming into our farm through winter corn grazing, pasture management, cover crops, and more. The reason why I love what I'm studying so much is because as I'm learning about conservation, I'm seeing just how important farming is from a conservation aspect.
I believe agriculture, specifically the beef industry, is a vital tool that we need to utilize for conservation. It is especially important in this day and age because the media has turned the beef industry into a scapegoat for climate change. The media often twists facts and manipulate words to make it sound like the beef industry has these major impacts on the environment when that isn't always true. What doesn't get talked about outside of the agriculture industry is the fact that the prairie grasslands are one of the most endangered ecosystems in the world, and that we can actually use cattle to not only conserve those grasslands, but also utilize it to feed people. With my agricultural background as well as my education, I want to refocus the narrative that the beef industry is a negative contributor of climate change. I want to refocus that to the fact that we can use the beef industry as a tool for conservation and environmental movements through carbon sequestration and conserving our grasslands and building soil health and topsoil. I'm so passionate about the interconnection and overlap between conservation and agriculture that I want to use my education to work in a field where I can make a real difference in both of those sectors.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Now I would like to welcome to the stage Hannah Nickel from Pickardville, Alberta. Thank you, Hannah. This is Hannah Nickel from Pickardville, Alberta. We'll congratulate her and take a couple of photos.
Thank you. Congrats.
Well, congratulations, Hannah, and thank you so much to everyone who submitted their video applications. We are already looking forward to next year's applications.
Congratulations, Hannah. Wasn't that awesome? And I'm sure the other videos are just as good as well. So congratulations. I'd like to move on now to number 10 on our agenda, the Marketing Committee report. I'd like to introduce Russ Mallard. Russ is an industry representative at the agency representing the Canadian Meat Council. He leads the Marketing Committee, which oversees the work of Canada Beef and the investments into market development and promotions made through Check-Off and the import levy dollars. We'll be hearing from Canada Beef on specific programs and the outcomes shortly. Welcome, Russ.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Julie. And it's a pleasure to be here today. It's a very hard act to follow when you see a nice, young, successful person come up here. And however, I'm going to start off by saying we're having a 50th anniversary luncheon. How's that? Come on, have a free steak dinner or a free beef meal here at lunchtime. And the good news is Canada Beef is now 50 years old. So I think that deserves a round of applause. I think that... I think it's looking pretty good for 50. If you really want to know the truth, I think Canada Beef has come a long way, and thanks to the investment that the beef producers have made and governments and so on over the last 50 years, we have a very vital organization that I think continues to do good things and gets the word out on Canadian beef in a way that, in a very special way. I think we definitely have a really unique product to offer the world and Canadian consumers as well, and we do our best out there every day for our producers. So I wanted to basically say that it's my pleasure to be the relatively new chair of Canada Beef. I took over from Mike Kennedy. Mike Kennedy was in this chair for about 10 years. Mike I guess timed out from the agency last fall or last summer. So we want to take a moment to thank Mike Kennedy from Cargill for his efforts over the last over those previous 10 years. We're responsible for planning and establishing Canada Beef's strategic business and operational goals and objectives, and the overall management and operation of the business of its business and affairs. The committee provides oversight of the Canada Beef investment plan and budget, and works with the president to ensure the business strategy is correct, oversees its implementation, and evaluates its results. The Marketing Committee consists of a broad range of representatives from all aspects of the beef and veal industry. The business insight, expertise, and perspectives of our committee members results in effective dialogue and collaboration within the committee. That committee was introduced a bit earlier today to everybody. If you were here earlier today, the committee was introduced already, but I do want to take this moment and thank our committee. And so I appreciate all the efforts that our committee makes. We have our vice chair is Steve Christie, and then we have Jack Chafe as our finance chair, and we have an excellent committee. Michael Young is our president, as you all know. At the agency's general meeting last August, the Marketing Committee elected their executive, as I just mentioned who we are. The committee elected 2 members at large as well for 2022-2023, Clay Holmes of Intercity Packers and Cam Daniels of Harmony Beef. And Julie Mortensen of Saskatchewan, who's right to my left, is the agency's first youth member, joined the Marketing Committee as an ex officio member as well. So it's great to have her perspective of the young producers there as well. So I wanted to mention that succession planning is a thing this year because Michael announced his retirement at the end of 2024. So in March 2024, Michael will be stepping back. Michael Young will be. So we have a committee that's been struck to try and find a new president, and that's been ongoing now for a while. And we hope if we're successful here in the next little while, we'll have a new president that'll be able to spend 5 or 6 months with Michael Young, so we have a smooth transition to get us into the new fiscal year. And the planning process of Canada Beef starts to take place now, and over the next couple of months, the plan will be put together. If we are able to successfully hire a new president here in the next couple of weeks, that new president will be able to work with our current president and hopefully effect a very successful transition plan and get the fiscal 24-25 plan in place. The drive to use producer funding efficiently extended to operational space. Canada Beef reduced its operational footprint in the Calgary and Mississauga offices, which resulted in a significant cost savings, can be redirected to programming or other needs as identified. It's a good example of how Canada Beef leadership team is focused on ensuring the maximum value for producers. The Canadian Beef Centre of Excellence facility reopened in January 2023. The newly renovated CBCE studio will ensure the facility can accommodate increased demand for video resources to support a variety of projects, including the Gateway, Canadian Beef Advantage educational programs, the Consumer Test Kitchen, and hosting functions. So this was one of those things that nobody plans for. When Michael Young became president, and basically almost, well, over 4 years ago now, I don't think he would have envisioned that something like COVID would come along and completely disrupt our industry as it did. So thanks to Michael's leadership and the support of his committee and the support of Check-Off, a significant investment was made in retooling the Centre of Excellence. If you haven't had a chance, if you happen to be in the neighborhood of, take a chance to go up and see it, or double check to see if you have a chance to go and see the Centre of Excellence. It's definitely worthwhile. It's a tremendous resource for us to have. I wanted to just finish up here by saying that Canada's beef funding agreement with the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, CAP, concluded on March 31st, 2023. A funding application was submitted to its replacement, the Sustainable CAP, a new 5-year agreement effective April 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2028. So we're waiting word on that. I don't know that we've got word back yet. The government works as government does. It takes a little while to get these things through. So I wanted to mention that as far as we believe we've done a great job in navigating the challenges on behalf of Canada's beef producers. The Canada Beef team will continue to collaborate with the beef value chain to ensure markets and producers are prioritized appropriately in the strategic planning process, and this ensures industry alignment and, most importantly, ensures producer investment is being maximized. I also have a chance as the chair of the Canada Beef Marketing Committee to sit in on the Beef Advisors group, which is in the process of inventing or coming up with a new 5-year plan for the industry. That's taking place. We meet several times a year on that, and that way we have a chance to contribute our marketing perspective as well. And since a year from now will be our next conference, and hopefully Michael will be canoeing and enjoying his retirement, I want to just take a moment to actually thank Michael Young. Michael, are you here somewhere? I'm sure you are. There you are, Michael. Do you mind standing up? Michael, I want to give everybody a chance to thank you for all your contributions. It's a bit early. I know the job's not done yet, but there's lots to do between now and the end of March. But I want to take this opportunity in the group of your peers and the group to thank you for all the efforts you put in to making Canada Beef, even better than it was when you took over, and set a really good path forward for the future. So thank you, Michael. Thank you. So that's it for my report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Russ. I'd like to open the floor quickly for a couple questions for Russ. If anyone would like to address the room, please come up and join the mic in the center. Okay, not seeing any questions for Russ. I just want to say thank you, Russ, for your report and for sharing the marketing committee news with us. Going from there, we're going to start looking at our service provider reports. We have asked our friends at BCRC, Canada Beef, and the PSE team to present a few strategic projects or programs that they have worked on and that generate measurable value for our industry. We can field a few questions for a few minutes in between each service provider, and again at the very end if there's any other questions that may come up. I'd like now to welcome Andrea Brocklebank from the Beef Cattle Research Council. The BCRC received about 27% of the checkoff last year for investment into research and development priorities for the Canadian beef cattle industry. Andrea and her team, just like other service providers, they report annually to the agency, and a summary report can actually be found in our annual report. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you for having me today. When asked to do this, we were asked to talk about what we're doing in terms of results of a few programs, and then also if we had any challenges. And, you know, BCRC's just had such a fun and interesting growth path over the last 10 years. It's actually celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. I think there's so many anniversaries this year. And it's really evolved. So I wanted to talk about our funding situation to start, and then what we've done with that. When I started with BCRC, it was a half-time position. It was me. We funded about 4 projects a year. And I can tell you that did not address even a tenth of the priorities that industry had for research. That funding situation changed in the sense that government was moving away from funding research on its own. If industry wanted research, we had to invest as an industry in it. And so there was a start at BCRC in the investment in Check-Off, but it was pretty small. And so what happened is we basically changed our funding situation. In terms of, I do want to take a step back. In terms of who the BCRC is, for those in the room who aren't aware, we are our national industry-led funding agency for beef, cattle, and forage research and extension. Basically, it's funded by producers. So our board is representative of producers from across the country. And these guys and gals are passionate about research. It's something I'd say. We hand them a lot of proposals, but we also really task them to understand the priorities that need to be funded. Research is a long-term game, so you need to be looking far out in terms of what's funded. You don't start funding things when an issue arises. And so our board is just represented there. And we do fund a lot of different programs. Research is something where you need to be covering things like animal health and welfare, forage and grassland productivity. We've seen out of this last cluster several successful new forage varieties funded, which increase productivity, also address things like drought tolerance and flood tolerance in certain areas. Likewise, feed grains, where we've been co-funded several new feed varieties for barley. We support research capacity and several other programs here as listed. We also jumped into the extension game, which I'm going to talk about a bit more as governments moved away from extension. And this became very important because it's great to fund research, but if we're not getting it out to producers, what's the point, to be honest with you? And so in terms of our funding status, in 2000, I think it was 16, maybe 17, we started talking about increasing the national checkoff. And in part, it was to increase the investment in research. We knew it was underfunded, critically underfunded, actually. And so we were really excited about it. We developed a 10-year plan. We knew we had to ramp up slowly in terms of the funding, just knowing you don't want to spend all of the money in 1 year, 3-year projects, and then do another. So we staggered our start for funding. A few things happened during that period. I'm a planner, if you know that, and I really struggle when plans don't go as planned. So basically, this is the BCRC funding position, and I actually pulled this in part because we've been planning for quite a while. When we developed our plan, we did a 10-year cash flow because of the fact that most of our investments are 3, 5, and 10 years in length. So we need to plan ahead. If we overspend early, then we're in really big trouble later on. So those 2 lines, the blue line is the NCO allocations to research, and the orange line is what our reserve is. And basically what you'll see is back in before the increase in checkoff, we were stockpiling some money for the next science cluster. That's our largest program, huge investment with Agriculture to Canada, 21 million. And if the increase didn't come, we had to have funding available to do that. So we built our reserve a bit, and then our revenues, as you see, were just above $1 million from national checkoff. The increase started to happen in 2018-19, super excited about that. Council approved a 5-year plan to ramp up to increase the programming, so we knew our reserve would grow at that point in time. We originally proposed allocations to BCRC would receive, when we worked with all of the Canadian beef advisors, we were going to receive about 4.2 to 4.5 million. This was exceeded. We actually went over 6 million our first year, and I should be really excited about that gift, but sometimes it just means some planning. And so we actually went over that 6 million mark just due to provincial allocations and marketings at that point in time. Allocations began to change, so our revenue started to go down, but then one of our biggest challenges was COVID, just like everybody else. It shut down and delayed research hugely. So we were approving projects left, right, and center, but continuing to defer start dates on new projects. Existing projects were going, but researchers said we cannot handle anymore. Like basically we just are gonna get done what we have. So that meant that reserve drawdown that we were planning slowed down substantively, and basically we communicated as a board that we would continue to plan and move forward, but we would have to manage those funds in the meantime. Right now, this is kind of where we're at right now. BCRC programming continues to ramp up. So we went from that handful of projects a year to the fact that we have over 100 project investments across research, extension, proof of concept, research chairs, and VBP. And our reserve has started to decline. There was a slight increase in 22-23 with the wrap up of Cluster 3 and the lag in Cluster 4 starting, which I'll speak to. And revenues are about steady. Right now, we're in planning phase for how we move forward, knowing that revenues are going down just with the decline in marketings, which is expected in the next several years. And we're at an allocation point where we were kind of planning to be previously. And so that's where our reserve will go down to that $2 million level. And this is where we feel, you know, we've always said we need to maintain about $2 million when we've got so many contracts out. And we have a lot of large program commitments right now in the books. So commitments to me is stuff that is contracted but not gone out the door yet, including Science Cluster 4, which will be about $9.6 million this year. Approved research that's waiting for matching funds, that's about 3.6. Our research chairs, which are 10 years invested, and then our future programming as well. And so I just wanted to highlight this because really what we've had to do is ramp up that programming and figure out what we're doing, and make sure that we're being prudent with producer funds, but also making sure that we stagger it appropriately so that we meter it out, knowing that over the long term, we are getting to that point of more stable revenues and in fact reduced revenues. So in terms of KTT, we're asked to talk a few success points, and I do want to talk about our KTT program. There's so many things to talk about extension. If you haven't already, go to beefresearch.ca. You should sign up for our blog. If you aren't a producer, or if you are a producer, you'll find valuable information for your operation, but also just as a checkoff payer, so you understand what you're investing your dollars in. We have blog, webinars, podcasts, lots of decision-making tools, lots of things for you to look at. And I think the biggest thing there is we're trying to ensure that we encourage that adoption of technology. So one of the most recent ones is we're focusing on water management. And this, of course, becomes exceptionally important with drought where water quality can be an issue. And really trying to provide, how-to videos for testing, provincial lab information, and tips on how to prevent water woes for producers. And this is an example of where we will often pivot based on what we're seeing producers inquire about and search about on our website as well. So we have a lot of decision-making tools. One of the things we recognized early on is it's great to have fact sheets about new technologies, but actually encouraging producer adoption means walking them through that continuum in terms of what the economic impact is to their farm, in terms of value and cost, and some of the things they need to consider. So one of the ones we hounded on for quite some time is around feed testing, encouraging the feed testing, and then we found out most people, including myself, struggle to read those reports and what they actually mean. And so we have feed testing tools here to help producers understand those things and inform their decisions. We also just recently launched, very excited, actually this last week, CowBites. CowBites is a ration balancing software that was originally developed with the Alberta government, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, in partnership. And when Alberta got rid of their extension, they basically told us they weren't going to manage anymore. And so we decided to assume it, and it took some while. If you know working with provincial lawyers, you know it takes quite some time. But I'm thrilled that we can make it available for industry. It's a small cost. You get a USB, and we will hopefully be moving it to a web-based system eventually where we can regularly update the program and ensure it's relevant for industry. But especially as we deal with drought situations where we're looking at alternative feeds, this becomes incredibly important to have these types of on-farm tools for producers. The other one, building upon the CAF 911 series we did, where we really focused on improving, reproductive health for calves and survivability, is we recognized in working with our veterinary network that there was increased need for resources on remote drug delivery devices. Safely using these for the animal, also safely using them in terms of things like broken needles, which are a problem if they occur and are found at the processing or unfortunately, the consumer level. And so we developed some resources which are available on our website, as well as we're distributing them through the vet distribution network we have. Also a video in terms of how to deliver, but really just trying to get producers to understand the role they play. And knowing that these, at one point it was discussed, should we even talk about using these devices? And our personal farm operation, there's land where it is very difficult to get an animal in. It actually causes a lot of problem if they're lame, and so this device reduces the animal welfare issues in terms of trying to move them several miles, and also the safety of the person who's trying to move that animal. So if we can improve how we use those devices, I think we're doing better for our industry. So the biggest thing with our KTT is we recognize we can develop lots of great things, but if producers aren't aware of them, that's a problem. And so we started to realize we need to figure out who those informers are, who those outreach people are that aren't just us, because we have a relatively small team. We can't do it all across the country. So we've really connected with the Technology Transfer Network, which includes a lot of the provincial organizations, researchers, extension workers, those types of things, veterinarians. So we have newsletters for producers. That's great if producers want to sign up, but we've also launched some other newsletters. One goes directly to vets. We've seen a really increased level of subscribership to this, so vets are being able to understand what's available, so when they talk to producers, they can help producers. And this also helps vets in terms of just, if producers have questions, they don't always have time, but if they can refer them to resources, this is a great way to go. And we've just launched one as well for our tech transfer network, so they're aware of what's out there and they can distribute it further. So really trying to elevate our voice without spending a lot of funding, knowing that we have limitations in terms of our staff availability. On the research side, I'm just going to quickly cover a few things. As I mentioned, we do a lot of research across the country. We are national, so we do try to, and what you do in Alberta doesn't always apply to the Maritimes, and likewise in northern Saskatchewan versus southern Saskatchewan. There's very different growing environments for cow-calf and feedlot. And so we really have to recognize that. So currently we have about 100 projects in progress and 16 to be contracted. This was in April, so that doesn't include our current science cluster. And the big thing with this is we really try to leverage that producer money. So usually we can do a direct 1 to 2 leverage. So for every dollar producers invest, 2 additional dollars come from provincial government, federal governments, other organizations, private sector. And then usually we can get up to a 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 when we look at subsequent investment. And this doesn't include the institutional funding for researchers, labs, all of that. And so that's one of the biggest things that we see the value in terms of those allocations, because BCRC money at the table often means other funders will fund projects. They will pick up the part of the tab as well. And I think that's really important in terms of the influence industry has. So as I mentioned, we did wrap up the last science cluster. It was a $21.6 million investment, wrapped up March 31st, 2023. It's actually a fun time for us in the sense that a lot of those projects now have results, and it's about getting those results out. But it also meant starting the next one, because this partnership's quite significant for us in terms of agriculture and agri-food Canada funding. So we recently announced that the Science Cluster 4 was funded, a total of $21.7 million, $12.1 million government, and $9.6 million industry. And I think the one point to point out is we are very appreciative of the partnership with Ag Canada, but this program has been heavily underfunded. There's large competition for the funds, and what is being expected is industry to step up with more funding and government less. So although the totals are that's not going to work. The totals are much the same in terms of the 21 million. You'll see that industry is putting in a lot more funding this time around. And this is a concern to us because we really see that a lot of the research, actually, this time we were expected to ensure that we were addressing government priorities related to greenhouse gas reduction, climate change, sector resilience, and economic growth. And I guess the one thing I would say in terms of making sure we did that, that's where the 2030 goals we had and the industry plan was really important, because we could say to the government, we have a plan, it aligns with your plan in terms of those goals. And really, when I talk to producers, the thing I want to emphasize is, yes, we're funding environment research, But a lot of that research is actually relevant to you as a producer because it's about increasing forage productivity, feed productivity, animal health. And if we increase productivity, we reduce the footprint. The biggest difference between these two pies, because they're basically the same, but it's showing you how we're allocating in terms of some of those other areas. The biggest difference is how we present it, but also the measures we take. For producers, we're talking about, improving animal health. To the government, we're taking measures, as an example, in terms of carbon sequestration with forages, while also improving forage productivity. So just trying to meet those metrics on both sides, because as an industry-funded operation, we want to be relevant to our industry. The one thing else it's a success point for us, is we have a lot of research results. They're exciting to some people, not everybody. Final reports are lengthy. Reynold and Stacy and Sydney can attest to that, and we read them all. Or I shouldn't say we, they. Researchers focus on peer-reviewed journals and research publications. Sometimes there's KTT, but not always, because some of them aren't necessarily aligned with that. But what we've done for producers, instead of trying to dig through our site and figure out what we're doing, we've launched a quarterly blog post that really focuses on research results. So the first one went out. It showed several projects that we funded. It's short snippets to tell you what we're doing, in case you're wondering. Just as an example, of course, the top one that's been talked about a lot is we did a lot of research on transport and rest stop implementation with the new regulatory change with the federal government around transport. That project was really focused on, do rest stops, improve animal outcomes or animal welfare? And it really didn't tell us that it did. But the second part is another research came to us and said, can I take, I think it was nasal swabs, right, Reynold? Can I take nasal swabs of these animals several times throughout the period? And we said, sure. What was really interesting about that is those results have really shown us that basically the increase in BRD relevant bacteria on those swabs is large. And so for cattle that go through rest stops versus the cattle that did not get rested at a rest stop during transport. And we kind of knew that in the sense that rest stops, they're more stressed, they're unloading, they're reloading. Also, they may be commingled or at least adjacent. And so that's one of the ones where we're really working with CFIA now to communicate on the fact that sometimes what the public sees in terms of improved animal welfare is very different than what the industry understands. But having data to actually validate that is critical. We can't just say it, we have to have science to inform it. Last one on this side, I think, is research capacity. We funded several research chairs. They're doing great things. Most of them have just got underway. These are just a sampling of them across University of Alberta, University of Saskatchewan, Western College of Veterinary Medicine. But what I want to highlight is the indirect value of industry investments in research and research capacity. And this came really loud and true to us this year. So when industry's at the table, whether it's BCRC or your provincial organizations, institutions maintain and invest in research facilities because they've got researchers who are active in them and getting well funded. Institutions filling positions when retirements or changes have occurred, which a lot is happening right now with just the changeover with the baby boomers. So what we see is they're more apt to fill beef positions if we're at the table, even if we're not directly funding that position, but if we're at the table, even in an environment of budgetary deficits. And this came to us very loud and clear when we worked with 2 institutions most recently to say, we'll provide a bit of startup funding to ensure you fill that position. And those are 30-year positions. So if we can get it filled, it's a good thing. And so these are the types of things that are really important. But the last is also we've had active industry participation in the hiring of key positions. Over 10 positions we've interviewed or had industry participate in the interviews. And this helps just ensure, institutions have their thoughts, but ensuring that we're hiring strong industry-oriented candidates is positive, but also creating those strong linkages. And I put the house on fire because one of the things we learned back when I started with BCRC is we'd lost a lot of critical researchers, and you don't start hiring them when the issue arises. When you have a food safety issue, don't start hiring a researcher. You need to make sure you have that capacity, that fire station, that hydrant available and ready. And that's what we're trying to do with the universities right now, is be very proactive to make sure we have the capacity when an issue arises. The last program I'm going to quickly cover, because I'm sure I'm running out of time, is our proof of concept. We launched this in 2018, and we invest a very small amount of money, under $50,000, to fund projects where they're high risk, they're uncertain outcomes, and usually we would not invest that research. If they looked at a proposal, a normal proposal, we'd say, that's pretty high risk, we don't want to put money in, it's not proven. And so to reduce that risk, we basically allow every year 5 to 6 projects that come forward, they give us a concept, and we put some money towards it. This has been an extraordinarily successful program for the industry. We've had projects that fail, and that's great, in the sense that instead of spending $500,000 on a research project that fails, they've been able to test the concept and then they shelve it. We've had projects that have been successful, and then other funders pick them up to go get funding, or we fund further work, but we know that it's going to work out, hopefully. So we've just done 2. One was chemical-free sanitizers, so using LED technology and other technology, basically cold plasma is what it's called, other technology to look at replacing chemical sanitizers and also water reduction in the processing plants to reduce risk of E. coli. And then we also did one around sampling water bowls to make feedlot antibiotic resistance surveillance easier. Instead of running animals through chutes, we know that there's resistance occurring with BRD, which is a huge issue for our feedlots. And we're looking at, and it was successful to look at how to evaluate that using feedlot water bowls, which is way cheaper for our producers and our researchers, but also way better for the animals who aren't having to run through chutes to test for this. And so this is just a sampling of what we're doing. I've provided our budget here. I won't really speak to it unless there's questions, but we continue to operate in a focused manner to do what we need to do. And like I said, BCRC is 25 years old today, and research is a long-term game, and we're doing a neat series of articles this year just to highlight different areas where we've made progress. The first one came out actually around E. coli and what we've done as an industry over the last 25 years to advance things to the point where we're really positive. And moving forward, we'll be launching several others. That's it.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Is there, I think we have time for questions here. Is there any questions for Andrea? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Andrea. Andrea, producers can be proud of the work that you do and your team does at BCRC. The tools and extension your organization builds for producers are so valuable to us in the industry. And the communication that you're offering back right now is recognizable and appreciated. So thanks for all you do. I'd next like to welcome Amy Peck. Amy is Manager of Public and Stakeholder Engagement, who received about 6% of Check-Off last year. The Public and Stakeholder Engagement Program is facilitated in tandem between CCA and Canada Beef, with CCA receiving 75% of the funds and Canada Beef 25%. The two teams work together collaboratively and partner with other national and provincial groups to reach more Canadians. Welcome, Amy.
Awesome. Thanks, Chad. Nice to see you again. As Chad mentioned, my name is Amy Peck, and I manage the Public and Stakeholder Engagement Program. So our mandate is to increase public trust in the way beef cattle are raised in Canada. The objectives that we're working towards are outlined in the National Beef Strategy. So that's really where PSE was born out of, is this National Beef Strategy. And under the beef demand and connectivity pillars, there is objectives under public trust that we really informs our work every day. Our target audiences, unfortunately, when we say we like to talk to Canadians, there's only so far that the money can go. And so who are those must-win audiences for us on the environmental and health questions around Canadian beef cattle? So we've done a lot of public perception research, put a ton of money into this area to dial down into those must-win audiences that we can direct our communications towards. And our deliverables, so we do national issue management, we provide resources, tools, and training for industry, and then of course our communications tactics to win these must-win audiences. This is the fantastic team that I am surrounded with at Public and Stakeholder Engagement. Want to give them a huge shout out for their passion, dedication, and amazing work that they do every day. Lindsay Beavers is in the room. She's our stakeholder engagement specialist. Emma Cross runs our social media. She also supports Canadian Hereford, as well as VBP Plus. And Jenna Sarich at the back of the room. She's our technical consultant and also works part-time for CRSB. So just a ton of industry synergies that we're even having here with our staff. I don't know if I'm being aggressive enough with it. There we go. National Check-Off expected allocation to PSE for 23-24 is $849,000. As mentioned, that's then split. So 75% is coming to CCA. That represents about $637,000. And 25% goes to Canada Beef. That's $212,000. We are always looking to supplement producer dollars with outside grants and sources of income. So we have a pending SCAP application of $162,000 that would be payable over 3 years. And then Canada Beef has indicated that they're going to bring some marketing checkoff forward in the amount of $58,000 to supplement public stakeholder engagement activities. So I wanted to take you through 3 areas of our work, highlight some what we think are standout successes, and want to talk about measurable outcomes because unfortunately for us, public trust is pretty hard to measure. So a lot of what we do, we're trying to put as many metrics as possible to it to demonstrate that value to producers. And we were really proud to have a 16-to-1 ROI last year in the ROI study on national checkoff programs. Public and stakeholder engagement will be 5 years of a fully funded program at the end of this fiscal year. So still very much the newest checkoff program, the new kid on the block. So for national issue management, we create a lot of resources. So there's fact sheets, there's key messages that we provide for industry use. So whether you're going to take an interview on climate change or transportation, all of these fact sheets are written with public audiences in mind. We also have media monitoring through Meltwater. So we are looking at online conversations, we're looking at traditional media, we're tracking our own earned media, so that's media attention that we haven't paid for. And so generally producers sending us an article and saying, have you seen this? And the answer is yes, we have seen it. Our monitoring platforms do such a great job for us at picking up any of these conversations or mentions of beef. For issue response, any of these negative coverage of the beef industry that is worth a response, we are doing that. So letters to the editor, we're writing op-eds, and generally we're getting producers to then author those letters. So the feedback is coming from producers themselves. And we have really great international partners that we do issue response with. So there's the Global Meat Alliance, the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, as well as the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. So rarely do these issues originate in Canada. They're usually coming from the US, they're usually coming internationally. And so we're working on those messages and responses together. And then we have this expert network. So these are subject matter experts, whether they're researchers, veterinarians, primary producers, influencers, and we're providing them training opportunities so that they can be the best advocates for the Canadian beef industry as possible. and also wanting to be prepared. So if an issue arises and we need a veterinarian to talk on a certain subject, we already have those people in place. We already know that they're good for public audiences, and they've already had media training. So I talked about this last year, but one of my favorite Dennis Laycraft quotes is, "Luck favors the prepared," and so that's what we really try to do on our issue management strategy, is to try and be prepared as possible. We have weekly animal activist reports. This is something that we've been doing for a couple years now through the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. So several commodities join together on these reports. We're able to see what activities they're planning. We're able to see how they're covering the beef industry. And then it also flags for us when beef industry content is being reshared by these groups. And then we're able to let either the provincial or national associations know, hey, actually your latest video is getting picked up by activists, and so maybe you want to change the targeting of your paid advertising, so we make sure we're leaving that audience out. It's a really, really good tool for the industry, and it costs us $2,000 a year. And as part of that subscription, we also get background checks. So for $70, if you have somebody apply to work at your farm or ranch and you go, they don't have any beef industry background, if you want to make sure that there's no activist activity linked to that person, we can do those sort of background checks. So especially for large feedlots, I would really recommend taking advantage of that as a perk of our surveillance system. And then we're really looking forward to, we were going to have this crisis communications tabletop exercise in 2020, and instead we got our real crisis that we all had to work together on. But when we went back to the group of national communication managers and said, would you like to do a tabletop exercise? Everybody said, yeah, I think that would be really valuable. And so that's happening in September of this year. And so any of the communications staff from the provincial or regional associations are joining. And we are actually going to do a mock scenario on FMD. And so it would be focusing on the communication efforts around that. How do we all work together? Who takes the lead, depending on where the case is found? And I think it's just going to be a real advantage for our group to get another scenario to run through together and get the learnings from that. So these are the types of services that we provide to industry. And in terms of what does that mean for producers? What are the outcomes? It's consistent monitoring. As I said, traditional media, social media, and activist communications. And we're able to identify emerging issues or trends and respond accordingly. So I remember earlier this year asking a couple people, have you heard any of these murmurs around mRNA vaccines? And people saying, no, actually I haven't heard anything. And us going, well, we're starting to see it bubble up on social media. Let's get some key messages. Let's see how much we have to ramp this up. And so it just allows us to see things coming down the pipeline and be prepared for them. And then, of course, aligned, effective, and timely issue response. So whether we're directly responding to issues or whether we're supporting provinces in their own issue response. I think it's a real value to industry. The second one I want to focus on is equipping advocates. So one thing we know, farmers and ranchers consistently are the most trusted voice in the food system. When we're asking Canadians, who do you want to hear from in terms of where your food comes from? Always, farmers and ranchers are first. And in a time of decreasing trust in just about all institutions and industries, we see that being very stable. And so how can we leverage this trust in the people producing food? Well, we want to put farmers and ranchers first. Of course, we want you to be the face of our campaigns and our communications. So we're providing media training opportunities for industry representatives every year. And again, those are primary producers. They're also vets. They're also researchers. They're also food and culinary influencers who say, I want to know how to talk about grasslands with people that ask me. Terrific. Come to a media training and we'll talk about how to do that in a way that resonates with public audiences. This year, fingers crossed, first time didn't work, but we're gonna offer media training in French, so we're really excited about that as well, to have it in both official languages. We've got this great online program, Beef Advocacy Canada, that Lindsay Beavers has put together. It's modules online, learning about how to talk about the benefits of raising beef cattle in Canada with public audiences. Absolutely free, really recommend it, not only for primary producers, but let's say you have an event like Calgary Stampede, and you have a bunch of volunteers coming down, and they go, what do I say if somebody asks me, is beef bad for the environment? Take this online training course. Here's 6 ways you can position the benefits of beef cattle and be able to talk about greenhouse gas emissions if you get that question. So again, really trying to equip people to be the best advocates they can be. And this year we have a new flip book. We just got it on Friday, so I'm pretty stoked about it. So make sure if you want to look at it, we're going to have a bunch of copies for provincial and national board members. And it's just talking about tips and tricks that resonate with public audiences on the benefits of raising beef cattle in Canada. So meant to be calving book size, fit it in your jacket pocket, take it with you. Had a lot of requests for how do I remember the statistics, you know, the 68% of wildlife habitat, the 24% of grasslands left. Well, now you can have it at your fingertips to flip through at any time. And so, as I said, putting those producers front and center. Last year we did an influencer campaign called Good For You, Great For The Environment with our partners at Canada Beef. And so as you can see here, they were visiting farms and ranches across Canada, learning about these amazing environmental benefits of raising beef cattle. So, you know, Christine Tapley turned a gravel pit into amazing pastures and wetlands. In the middle there, we've got Chef Park. He owns Park Restaurant in Montreal, talking to Briley Farms, a Tessa nominee from Quebec. And then, of course, Keith, he is doing targeted grazing to help combat wildfire risk over in Kelowna. So having these culinary influencers go out and learn about all of these crazy benefits that they didn't know were possible. And so really just trying to help those producers be front and center in those campaigns. So all of our campaigns are directed towards our must-win audiences, as I said, using our perception surveys to define that. So we're spending the money as strategically as possible. These are the beef consumers who are most skeptical of the environmental stewardship of producers, but they want to know more. And the best part is that once they know more, they're pretty easily convinced on those benefits. We partner with influencers that connect with that audience and already have access to them to share their message and get our content. And in 2022, this influencer campaign gave us 70,000 views on Instagram, over 650,000 views on YouTube. And this year, we're just in the midst of our influencer campaign, and we're going across Canada talking about the upcycling ability of cattle, turning lettuce and apples and potatoes from food that otherwise would go to the landfill and transforming it and upcycling it into beef, and allows us to be in that food waste conversation, which is actually the #1 food-related goal for Canadians, is wanting to reduce their waste. And then last, I wanted to talk about our fun project where we're gamifying beef education. So we have taken Guardians of the Grasslands, the film, which has had such great success here at home, but also internationally. It was shown at COP27. It was shown at COP15 for the Biodiversity Conference. But we really want Canadians to have a chance to manage grasslands themselves. It's one thing to watch the film and go, okay, I care about this, but what does this have to do with me? To now taking an active role. So in the game, you get a parcel of grasslands. You can choose your breed of cattle. You have 50 head. And then you're allowed to move between different paddocks. And so if you're moving at the right time, leaving enough grass behind, you start to earn wildlife species. and you learn why that wildlife species requires grazing. Do they nest in the grass and they need these different lengths? Is it the aeration of the soil? What is it about the cohabitation that means that they're not there despite of the cattle, but they're there because of the cattle? And then also learning about carbon sequestration. So we're really proud of this initiative. It's a partnership between the Canadian Cattle Foundation, PSE, both from CCA and Canada Beef, Ducks Unlimited Canada, and CAP Alberta. So our first version was Alberta specific. And that launched in February. So since then, we've been at Aggie Days, we've been at the Calgary Stampede, we've been at WA Ranches with junior high kids. And I tell this story a lot, so I apologize if you've heard it before, but when we went to WA Ranches, we had 80 or 90 kids from 2 junior high schools in Northeast Calgary. So not only not a lot of connection to the beef industry, but a ton of new Canadians in general. And so to see them playing this game and within 2 or 3 minutes be like, Jordan, the grass isn't ready, you can't move there yet. Or like, the swift fox are denning, we're gonna lose wildlife points. So it was awesome for me to see them really connecting those outcomes and seeing the management decisions that it takes when you're running a ranch or a farm. We had a real great success at Cattle Trail, at the Calgary Stampede. Now the game is over at PNE in Vancouver. It'll be at the Royal Winter Fair. It'll be at Agribition. We've got plans for it to go everywhere. So if you're interested in playing, we'll have a couple tablets out in the trade show. I think it's also part of some BCRC programming on Thursday, but in the meantime, you can go to GOTG Game, so Guardians of the Grasslands Game.ca, and we do get to see all your points on the back end, so keep that in mind. So right now we're in the midst of expanding the game, so we have classroom versions for British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario. So they're connected to curriculum outcomes for grades 7 to 10 in social studies, in science, and in practical arts, which, that's interesting. We have a public version that we use for these trade shows. So instead of having to display learning competencies and answer questions, you just get to move your cattle and earn fun wildlife species. So that's what we're using at the Calgary Stampede, at Agribition. It's just an easier version, especially for little kids that don't have good reading comprehension. And we have a French version underway, so it'll be fully translated and narrated in French language and then connected to Quebec curriculum outcomes as well. And then this SCAP application, once we get it, official confirmation, we're also doing maritime versions for 3 provinces. So we were really happy. We had the game out at Cattle Trail, and CBC was interested in the game function, but really they were more interested in this story of how the beef industry is trying, I find it funny, to rebrand as grassland protectors, and you go, no, actually we're just trying to tell the story of being grassland protectors, you know. So that was great earned media for us. That was broadcast TV, radio, and print publication as well. So the outcomes for producers from this game, we've heard great feedback from teachers about the package. So kids watch Guardians of the Grasslands, the short film, and then they can either do worksheets that Egg in the Classroom has made, or they have a board game, or now we can finally do this gamification, which we're honestly 5 years behind, but at least we're there now. And we also got it added into Journey 2050. I don't know if anybody here has ever seen that, but that's Nutrien's classroom program. And they put a lot of money into Egg in the Classroom Canada to roll that program out. And the only downside of it is there's no livestock. It's all crop production. So when I contacted Nutrien to say, can you tell us the challenges and opportunities with your game so we can learn from your experience, and they said, we'd love to feature the Guardians of the Grasslands game as a breakout for these kids so that we're incorporating livestock. We're talking about the role of livestock in the whole food system. And so that's just creating, you know, partnerships and relying on shared values, and that cost us absolutely nothing and is going to get it in front of way more kids. So the earned media, of course, we saw the CBC coverage along others. So far we've had over 1,500 classroom plays. That's just Alberta. We've had over 3,000 people play the trade show version of the game. We've got over 16 schools registered. And so we're rolling out all of the other provinces here actually at the end of August. So really excited for that for the school season. So I wanted to end with one metric that makes me really proud, and I think one way that we can demonstrate success of all of the industry initiatives together in terms of building public trust. So in 2020, our public perception research saw 68% of Canadians have a positive impression of beef farmers and beef ranchers, and we just got our results on Friday from our repeat of that, and we're up to 70% of Canadians that have positive perceptions of beef farmers and ranchers. So seeing it go in the right direction is an amazing step. And that's where I'll end my presentation. We are doing a webinar on all of our public perception research results online. So if you're interested in attending, please just let me know. We can send you a link. You can also send me an email at the address on the screen there, and we'll have lots of great insights on how Canadians feel about the environmental stewardship of beef farmers and ranchers, and great tidbits for everybody to take away. So I'll leave it there.
Perfect, thanks Amy. We do have time for a couple of questions. If anyone on the floor would like to approach the mic, please feel free to do so. Okay, I see one question coming up.
Do you have a bit of a relationship with them, and can that be leveraged more? What sort of strategies, plans can you do by partnering with them?
Sure, great question. Thanks, Fred. I'll repeat it. It was, and correct me if I don't summarize it right, Fred, our relationship with the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity and how we're working together, how we could potentially leverage that relationship more. Perfect. So we are a partner in the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity at $10,000 per year, and that has been in place since 2019. And then on top of that, we pay for the activist surveillance membership, and that's been ongoing since 2020. So as part of our partnership with them, we get access to their public trust research. So every year they do national public trust research on all sectors of agriculture. So it's really a lump results set. There's one or two specific questions on beef, but there's a ton of value in it. That's where we get the farmers and ranchers as the most trusted voice in the food system. That comes from CCFI. And as being a partner, they'll come in and do personal presentations for us as well. And then we've partnered in some of their campaigns in the past. So you might have heard of It's Good Canada. That's one of their campaigns that they're rolling out. But they are just recently applying for the Federal Agri-Communications Fund that can only be rolled out to multi-commodity nonprofit organizations. So it's pretty much limited to Farm and Food Care, Saskatchewan and Ontario, or the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. And so we're part of a working group on that campaign that's going to focus on environmental sustainability of all of agriculture. So do a lot of work together with them. You bet.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Amy. Last call for any questions. Okay, seeing none. Thank you again, Amy. It's continually impressive. It truly is continually impressive to see the work that your group has done and continues to do to promote and safeguard the beef industry here in Canada. It means a lot to producers from coast to coast to be able to trust your team, and it's hard to believe it's only been 5 years of PSE. All right, now I would really like to welcome Michael Young from Canada Beef. Canada Beef received about 55% of the check-off investments last year and was allocated 100% of the import levy for the generic beef marketing. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you. And thank you for the topics. I have to say, challenges and successes, those are two of the things that motivate me. So I'm going to open this up just in case. Just in case the clicker doesn't want to go up. But let's just start here. So just to cover off some of the watch list items which I would consider to be challenges for us. And obviously you guys are aware of this, but it affects everything we do, everywhere we do it. So weather, disease, stubbornly high input costs, high retail margins, changing climate policies, these are affecting meat marketing around the world. Will people eat less meat because of these high prices? Are alternate proteins going to stage a comeback? We'll see. Livestock and meat prices will continue to increase. That is a mathematical certainty. It's not going to change anytime soon. The fact that the demand is so high for your product is a compliment to you. It is amazing how well beef is done in the marketplace all over the world. Grazing land values will increase. Asian beef inventories at the moment are large and the economies are wobbly. So we are seeing demand starting to go down, especially with some of our competitors. Record high cattle prices now, probably much more upside in the coming years. We certainly will see how much more consumers are willing to pay for beef on the world's table. 73 million more mouths to feed on the planet every year. They're going to want to eat something, and they're going to be looking for animal protein. The forecast calls for profitability if you can get through 2023, but the reality is global beef and pork producers are moving into declining production that will carry into the coming years. So those are some of the challenges we're looking at. But I like this slide. It just got released, actually. It's Animal Protein Supply Forecast 22 to 2031. So over the past 20 years, global meat and poultry production have averaged about 4.8 million tons growth each year. So UN FAO forecasts now indicate over the next 10 years, animal growth rate, the annual growth rate, will average just 3 million tons. Now, population, incomes, and appetite for animal proteins is rising globally. The highest bidders, no doubt, will get the meat. I've just sort of drawn a, hold on here, that'll pop, oh, there you go. So there's a bit of a trend line there that I put in, but you can see where the demand is going and where the supply is, and that will ensure high prices moving forward. Now, if you have been watching the trade balance, overall Canada is doing quite well. These are June numbers, just fresh off the from the government. And in the volume side, we're about just 3.3% under year-to-date last year, June. We're 2.4% in value ahead of same. On the import side, on the volume side, we're 1.7% over last year the same time, and 0.1% negative in value. So the balance is maintaining. We're not seeing as much meat come in as we had expected. There is a lot of lower priced meat being offered. It is out there, and it is a concern to us, and we've got programs in place now to support Canadian supply in Canada. Now, I want to dial in on some things that we generally don't talk to you about. We've been changing how we measure things. I mean, we're trying to fine-tune it year over year. So, and this is the first. The committee hasn't even seen this, but we're always looking at different ways of measuring. And this is an interesting one because this covers our generic promotion. So generic promotion is the investment and promotion that supports the Canadian beef brand. It can include brands, regional brands, and often does, but the focus of it is Canadian beef. This particular money is leveraged with our cap funding, typically 50-50 for eligible products, and or for eligible costs. And what I'm showing you here is, this is a breakdown of investments that are directly attached that will benefit the packer. So we do lots of investments that benefit all Canadian beef in every aspect, but there are sales promotions that just benefit certain packers. So we started measuring that. Now I can't share with you who they are, this is part of the confidentiality thing, but you get to look at this a slightly different way. From the Alberta pork processor side, and this is for last fiscal year, so $2.3 million investment. You can see where the markets that money was invested in, and it benefited all 5 of the Alberta beef processors who are in the export business. So you can see the majority of it was Mexico, Latin America. Japan was 28%, South Korea was 15%, China and Hong Kong, mostly Hong Kong, was 9%, and then Taiwan and Southeast Asia is 11%. If we look at Ontario, 64% of that was invested in programs that benefited those packers going directly to Japan. China and Hong Kong was 11%, Taiwan, Southeast Asia was 22%, and then emerging markets was about 3%. That would include EU, United Emirates, Minya, all these countries there. So total it was 2.6 million, and that covered up 151 projects in the last fiscal year. Now keep in mind, that's generic promotion with a specific packer that it benefits. Now that packer's not promoted, their brands are not promoted. It's the Canadian beef brand, but there is a direct benefit back to Mr. Packer. We're now measuring that. The second program I want to talk to is, it's actually 2 programs that we created back in 2019. We realized that there was a bit of a gap in the programs and services we brought to the table, and that was the ability to support branded promotion. Branded promotion is very important because if you work with any packers, you know that they're in business. They compete not just globally with global competitors, they compete with each other. It's a very competitive business. We needed a mechanism that we could support this, but in a partnership approach. So we created 2 programs. The first one was approved, well, they were both approved by committee. First one was what we call the regular EMD program. That was 50-50 support, and that is 50% national checkoff dollars leveraged with 50% from that industry or that packer, and that puts $1 on the table for promotion. Now, we made that better by working with the Alberta government to get a grant for the Alberta industry, and then that we stacked on top of that EMD. So you see 50 cents from national checkoff dollars, and then another 25 cents from the Alberta government, and then the industry put in 25, which gave those Alberta guys 75-25, and that was originally a 3-year program. We had it extended to an extra year because of COVID. Now this program it's not unique. It was a hybrid version of something that another sector was using quite successfully. So we knew it was a proven method. We knew it works. It was just adapting it to our sector to make it work. It dials in on 5 key areas that are important. What we call EMI, or market investigation. That's outgoing missions, new customers, new markets, training. We have EMA, which is incoming missions, again, new customers, new markets, training and innovation. Market diversification, which is trade show events and seminar participation. Promotion and marketing, which is marketing material development, production and tasting programs. And then competitive benchmarking, which is in-market yield testing, financial performance, and meat quality sensory analysis. Now this is a category that is beginning to catch on the beef side, hugely important on the pork side. These guys, the pork guys, used this for years to increase their competitive position. So we brought it to the beef sector. It's slowly beginning to catch on. So I'm very happy to give you the results because it is part of the success. Again, the program itself is tied to that EMD program, the Alberta beef portion of it. When it completed, we were able to do a really nice deep dive on it, on what did it bring to the table and what were the benefits. And we needed that because that grant had exceeded. So with the help with our friends from Alberta Beef, we were able to pull together a good business review of what we were able to achieve through these challenging times, head up the highway to visit our friends in Edmonton to ask them for another grant for another 3 years. We're waiting. We're optimistic we're going to get that grant. I thought I would have a good announcement for you today, but we're pretty optimistic it's coming, and that will support us for another 3 years for that program. But essentially, what is that? Again, it's cost-shared funding support for eligible branded programs, and that's versus the cost-covered generic initiatives. So the two different sides of it. One is co-funded with SCAP, the other is co-funded with the packer directly and with the Alberta government. If you happen to be lucky enough to be in Alberta, you would qualify for the 75-25. Everywhere else was 50-50 because that's the way the program was built. It's a partnership right down the middle. The Alberta Beef Export Market Development Program, like I said, it was created in 2019. It provides that extra 25% cost shared support, and it allows us to invest it within those categories we know are important to the industry. All of the things they do fit under one of those categories. It just depends on where they're doing and where they're going. And that image there is a really good example. That's an Alberta beef promotion at Belloc Supermarkets in Tokyo, Japan. You can see the label. They're promoting Alberta beef halfway around the world, and happy to do it. They've been with us for a few years now, and the program is growing. So let's talk about the success part of it. What is it at? What were we able to do, especially since we went through COVID? So remember, this is over a 4-year period. And I'm happy to say, from 2019 to 2023, we were able to complete 147 EMD and Alberta Beef Export Market Development projects, 132 projects that supported all 5 packers in Alberta. 13 of those projects supported 2 Ontario packers, 2 projects supporting packers in BC and Manitoba. So the total EMD and Alberta Beef Export Market Development investment was $1.1 million, and that was combined. So $694,000 from the EMD, which is National Check-Off dollars, and then $500,000 from the Alberta Beef Export Market Development. The packers themselves, their investment was $448,000. And what was a surprise to me was the total sales increase, and this is reported by users of the program. So it's part of their qualifying for this thing. There's certain reporting, they've got to report to us. It's absolutely confidential, and the numbers I'm going to show, where it was spent, are all sanitized. But all the big packers got individual business reviews of their own performance, seeing the other generic guys. So none of the packers know exactly who's who, although when you look at the numbers, you can tell the 2 big guys, and then there's a bunch of other guys. The point is, the program works. It fits a large packer. It fits a small packer. It can fit everyone. So it's done quite well. This shows you where it was spent and an investment by strategic category, and that's got a lot to do with going through COVID. Majority of it was invested in promotion and marketing programs. That was 81 projects, about $651,000. And that's really the industry gearing up with materials, getting ready for when they could get back into the marketplace, building the tools they need to promote their brands, their Canadian beef, but under their brand, whatever those attributes were. So that was the biggest by far, 55%. Market diversification programs, trade shows and seminars, we had 34 projects. That added up to $307,000, and that was about, 26%. Export market adaptation, that's incoming missions. There was a few in the beginning and then quite a bit at the end, and we think moving forward that's going to be a lot busier now since we're off COVID. A lot more customers now are coming to Canada, and that's where that program is really going to come in. So that was 23 projects, $193,000. Export market investment, and that's outgoing missions. That was 5 projects. Obviously, there was no travel, but there was 5 outgoing projects, and that totaled $30,000. and then competitive benchmarking programs just for projects. Again, we're going to heavily promote that. It has a value. It paid off for the pork sector. Ask them, they'll tell you. And I believe there's a place for it in the beef sector as well, and I will make sure this information is maintained in the organization as I move on and the next leader comes forward. So, go here. Now this one again, it's very sanitized, so you don't know who's who, but you know, we've identified them as Alberta 1, Alberta 2, Alberta 3. You can figure out who they are, maybe, maybe not. But this is about as sanitized as I can get to report back to you. Again, each one of the packers got, the larger packers got a personal report of their own performance and where they fit within this thing. But the partner program usernames, again, project details are confidential, highly confidential. However, they can be identified as Packer 1, Packer 2. All large EMD partner programs users, they receive their detailed year-to-date business review that was presented to them in February of 2023. They know who they are, they know the investments, the partnership, and they know the return. Now, if you look at investments by market destination, this isn't really a big surprise, but the projects that are targeting all markets, that refers to a tactic or items that were produced that would apply to all markets that the packer was interested in. So that's where that comes in. But the rest of it is laid out pretty good. You can see the different areas. Obviously, Japan was the largest at 22%. China, while it was still open, was a big target for a lot of the packers at 20%. And then you've got Hong Kong at 5, Middle East at 10, UK at 1, EU at 16, Taiwan at 1, Southeast Asia at 11. Now let's talk about the success side of it. What did it all mean, and where does it all fit? Well, you know, I want to be clear here. We're not taking credit for growth, but we are letting you know we invested your dollars to support that growth. And we've broken that growth down. I've dialed in on 2018, the year before these EMD programs started, and we cut them off at 2022, which was the last full year. I also split it out from Ontario beef industry export volume and Alberta beef export volume. Remember that the Alberta beef side got 75-25, the Ontario guys had 50-50. But you could see significant growth in both. I mean, in fact, you know, we had almost a record volume year last year. Almost a record, over 500,000 tons. Haven't seen that kind of volume since the year before BSE. So volume-wise, value-wise, we're right through the roof. It was a huge record was set. But what's interesting is the growth that was able to be achieved from that period. That's when that money was developed, that was when it was invested, and that's how it turned out. Now the model itself can be translated and used in other provinces, and we do have an offer with the other provinces. If they want to look at their own version of an EMD, we're prepared to work with them if they want to pursue that. There's a bit of a formula for it. Again, we know it works. At least it works in Alberta. We think it could be applied to other provinces, and we will make that available to any provincial groups that are interested in partnering with us to bring their industry that 75-25 support. See? Yeah, you do have to hit it. Now this is just a way to look at it from the value side. On the Alberta side, you saw an increase, 1.5 billion over that period, 75.8% increase in value. On the Ontario side, you saw about 310 million over the same time period, and plus 57%. So impressive growth in both regions in Canada. So as I mentioned, EMD programs and beyond, the national program 50/50 has been updated and renewed. The committee has approved it. It's carrying on at 50-50%. Canada Beef and the Alberta Beef team met with the Alberta Agriculture and Irrigation team in February to review the program performance and request another $500,000 grant for 3 years. Again, we're optimistic that funding is going to come. The packers are used to this funding now. They've got projects. Some of them are even waiting for it to happen. We will negotiate a retroactive clause with the government when this grant comes, and I say when because I'm fairly sure it is going to come, and it'll be a huge benefit. And as I mentioned, we have offered the EMD program model at 75-25 to beef farmers of Ontario and Quebec. Beef, I think there's a great opportunity for Quebec to look at some opportunities like this, and I've talked with Andre about this possibility of us working with them if they're interested. The point is to bring the funding support to further develop the Canadian beef exports unilaterally across the country. It would be nice to see these provinces are able to go to market with this kind of support. So with that, I wanted to remind everyone that we've got our 50th anniversary luncheon. Please attend. We've got an interesting kind of 50-year retrospective. I mean, a lot happened, obviously. 4 organizations combined over 50 years. A lot to talk about, but I've condensed it down, and I think it'll go fairly quickly. So I hope to see you all there. I want to thank Russ and the executive and the committee for the support and the latitude they've given me over the last 4.5 years. It's really been a pleasure. Actually, it's been an honor to work with you guys again. And I have to say, the support from the committee has been super positive. You know, some of the ideas, a lot of the ideas were new. Some of them are old. We just dusted them off. We dusted off a lot of great stuff that CBEF was doing back in the old days. It was good, a good strategy back then. It's a good strategy today. We just needed to update it and dust it off. So we didn't recreate everything. A lot of this stuff was already being done. So again, it continues on return on investment. So with that, I think I'm finished. Pleased to take any questions if you've got any.
Thanks, Michael, for the presentation. Jack Chafe from Ontario. When you started off there, you started off with our export markets and are down on volume just a little over 3%. And the figure I seen from the U.S. As of the end of last week, they're down 14%. Very similar. Our 2 big markets, Japan and South Korea, are the ones that are really pulling us down. Yep. Any concern, or what's our plan moving forward, or is it those emerging markets that we've worked on, are those the ones that are going to pull us through?
So, I mean, our mandate is we invest in commercial sales directly. So, you know, we have market development tactics, which we're applying to all markets. And then we have programs like the ones I just showed you to support sales, commercial transactions that are actually made in these countries that are important. All of the markets you mentioned are in decline. The U.S. number is that, I think it's minus 14%. Every one of their markets is going down, including Canada. The only one that's going up is Mexico. So Mexico has been they have a strong peso. They're buying a lot from everyone, including Canada. So they're positive on both sides of it. But there's some moving parts there. And I'm going to touch on it on the Foreign Trade Committee meeting. Brazil is in negotiations with South Korea. South Koreans are coming. They want to take a look at their processing capacity. This is seen to be the first step in getting access for them. So Brazil is definitely looking at other markets. You know, their biggest customer, China, they had some issues with atypical BSE, as we did. They're back online, but it certainly affected them, and I think it's opened their eyes to we better expand our customer base. So they're going to be even more aggressive. They've also got a free trade agreement with Mexico, so we're going to see some more Brazilian beef moving into Mexico, which may also present some challenges for us for the markets that we have there. But again, it's grass-fed beef, it's not grain-fed beef. So it is a segment that will compete, but it doesn't exactly compete head-to-head with some of the products we bring to the table. If you look at the Mexican beef, especially the middle meats that are coming up north, a lot of the complaints we're hearing from people are simply that. It seems to be ungraded, it's super tough, or something else. We're hearing all kinds of interesting stories. Yes, it's value priced, and there is a market for value priced protein in Canada, in any market really, especially with prices the way they are. So I think that answers your question, Jack. So we've got, the value is we've got programs and services that support the market as it ebbs and flows through its through its process, you know. So, and that's really been the key. We're ready to go. We've got people on the ground. There are some little opportunities for us in all of these markets, and one of the things that makes it an advantage for us is we are a little bit smaller and we can move a little bit quicker. And we've heard that from some of the importer distributors, that, you know, we do like that Canadian supply. It's not our main supply, but it's a big part of our supply. So.
Hi, Michael. Always impressed by your information, and you're going to leave big shoes. Sheila Hilmer, Alberta Beef Producers. I'm just curious. Well, there's two questions I have. Do you see demand growing on grind versus premium just due to cost? And secondly, I was really curious about your packer reviews. Was that, I don't know if you can comment, but was negative or positive? Were they embracing the information that they got and found helpful, and hopefully will continue to be encouraged by more of that type of information?
The first question was
is the demand growing for more of a grind?
For grinds?
Versus premium cuts just due to cost?
So that is a huge challenge for us, and luckily, and again, going back to strategies that were created decades ago for different reasons. You know, we had OTM strategy, we had OTM issues like older, larger beef years ago. So Beef Information Center had developed really good strategies for value cuts years ago. We simply dusted those off, brought them back to the marketplace. We're even trying to increase the grind category, knowing that it's very popular to people now, but we're actually underdeveloped in source grinds. If you look at what's happening in the US and some of the other markets around the world, they're a little further along in selling some super high quality ground meat. There is a market for that, and some of the packers are aware of that, and some of them are moving forward. So it's part of the demand that we're seeing. We'll continue to support the value cuts, you know, and that's cooking methods. The gateway that I often talk about, I mean, I could have spent the whole time talking about the gateway, but my last report to you was about the gateway. This is specifically about what we're doing in export. And then the other question was, I mean, the packers, of course, appreciated the information. They were surprised to get it. They'd never gotten anything like that from us, and it will be an annual undertaking that we will do. So, but what I think it does is it really shines a light on the true partnership of how we're leveraging. I mean, you're investing, we're taking your dollar and we're leveraging that, you know, directly with either the federal government, the provincial government, or the packers directly, so that, you know, we're winning as a team here and moving ahead, and allowing them to have the latitude to promote their own brands, as long as they're not derogatory, and they aren't. Like, that is part of the go, no-go on these applications. If you're making a statement that your beef, your Canadian beef is better than his Canadian beef, it does not apply to this program. Right. So this is packers who are promoting their beef. It may be from Alberta, it may be from Ontario, and it's from Canada. So that's what these programs are for. I think we're it. Again, thank you very much for all your support, and I look forward to seeing you over the lunch hour.
Thank you, Michael. It's really appreciate all you've done for us in the beef industry, and it has certainly been a pleasure working with you over the past 4 years. So I'd like to call up Howard at this time. We'll move into the elections portion of our agenda, and our parliamentarian here, Howard, is going to help us through that. We appreciate your help through this section, Howard. And I'd just like to remind voting delegates, if you're back in the gallery, please move forward to the tables for the voting section.
I haven't finished yet, Chad, so don't thank me yet. All right, thanks a lot, Chad and Julie, for the introduction. You'll notice in your package that initially we did have an election for the marketing committee member at large. It's turned out that Cameron Blake has made the decision to withdraw his name as a nominee, which means there will no longer be an election for these seats, for these 2 seats at marketing committee at large. The other 2 nominees will now be running uncontested and will not require a vote. You can learn more about these 2 nominees, Mike Guest and Jim Clark, in the AGM handbook in the election section. Okay, the nominees are on the screen here, as well as their bios are in your AGM package. We will quickly introduce them all. Mary Pazook from Manitoba Beef Producers, Sheila Hilmer from Alberta Beef Producers, Andrea Van Eiderson from BC Cattle Industry Development Council, Sylvain Bourque from Quebec Beef Producers, and Trevor Welch from New Brunswick Cattle Producers. Industry representatives are as follows: Steve Christie, Retail Food Service, Russ Mallard, Canadian Meat Council, John Curtis, Canadian Meat Council, and Dennis Burrell, Retail Food Service Temporary Substitute. And representing the Marketing Committee, again, Mike Guest and Jim Clark. At this time, I would like to accept a motion, or take a motion to accept these nominees by acclamation. Larry Weatherby. A seconder. Your name, please. Got that? Got that, Taylor? Got it. Thank you, Philip. Any discussion? So seeing none, we'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your green. Motion is carried. At this time, can I also have a motion to accept the agency board and the marketing council for the years 2023 and 2024? Sheila Hilmer. Seconder. Mary Pazook. Thank you, Mary. Any discussion? We'll call the question. All in favor, please raise your green. Motion is carried. With the election section now complete, I will turn the mic over back to Chad and Julie.
All right, thanks so much, Howard. We do have a small gift for you, if Chad can find it under the table here. Yeah, you bet. Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Perfect. That concludes the nominations and elections portion of our meeting here today. So we'll move on to recognizing Kirk Jackson, and we'll bring back Jeff Smith, our chair, to make a special presentation.
Before I bring a presentation to Kirk, I'd just like to thank Chad and Julie for chairing the meeting today. And I'd also like to thank Melinda, Taylor, Emily, and Brad for their work at the NCO and making my job as chair run smooth. So Kirk Jackson joined the agency officially in 2013, although he was an observer for a while, for a short period of time before that. In the 10 years that Kirk has served on the board, he's seen a lot of the industry and organization changes and can personally attest how far we have come as an agency in the past few years. Though Kirk's time on the board, he has navigated some incredibly challenging industry hurdles. COVID-19 was one of the more recent hurdles to cross. However, he also helped navigate the agency through two major organizational structure changes: the internal separation of the Marketing Committee and the Check-Off Administration, and the introduction of the import levy, and a national check-off increase, and countless other industry milestones. Kirk has worked with 6 board chairs, a variety of characters on the agency board, and has spent 4 years as the agency's finance chair. Here he focused on financial transparency, led the search for a new audit team, and has helped lead the SHRED feasibility study. Kirk, I'd like to thank you for your dedication to the agency and the Canadian beef producers. We've been incredibly lucky to have you as sharing your passion, your dedication, and your sense of humor with our group for the last 10 years. I'm sure we'll be seeing you around as you continue representing the beef producers of Quebec, as well as those from around the country. On behalf of the agency, I'd like to present you with this custom-made belt buckle, but due to translation issues, it didn't show. However, we do have some other stuff for you, Kirk, and your buckle is on its way. Kirk.
Thank you, Kirk, for all you've done, and it's really been a pleasure working with you as you were on my executive as well, and just appreciate all our conversations. We're now moving into the resolution portion of our meeting, and I can report there were no delegate resolutions submitted for the 2023 AGM. Since we don't have any resolutions, the agency would like to open the floor to board and delegates for a few moments for questions or comments regarding the agency business. The agency executive are all available to answer questions, as well as the general manager, Melinda Gurman. As a reminder, only registered voting delegates and those invited by the agency members or general manager may address the meeting. Be sure to introduce yourselves and state clearly where you're from. And I'd like to also have you keep in mind that you're standing between us and the Canada Beef luncheon here in a few minutes. But anyway, freely come to the mic. If you have any questions or comments, we'd accept those at this time. Okay. All right. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on. I've just been told that the voting cards need to be handed in at the table as you go out the door, please. Okay. And with that, I'll turn it over to Julie.
All right, thank you, everyone. With that, we have completed our agenda today, and we're almost ready to adjourn. I encourage you to take the AGM survey by scanning the QR code on the report in front of you, on the front of your package. It'll also be sent in a follow-up email. Your feedback is very important to us and will help us make our future meetings even better. Once again, everyone is invited to the Canada Beef Anniversary Luncheon, which is kicking off over in Hall D immediately after we sign off here.
Directors and committee members, please be sure to be back here in this room for headshots, group photos, and our closed meeting at 1:15. So immediately after lunch, please come back here. I'd just like to thank everyone for being here. It's a great crowd, and at this time, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn. Trevor Welsh adjourns. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the conference.